いつの日ぞ fight. We face our enemy head on. And when we take their life, we look them in the eye with courage and respect. This is what makes us samurai.
What is happening, people? A very good evening to you all. Welcome to the Company of Gamers podcast, or should I say, the worldwide Company of Gamers podcast. Yes, we have had a slight rebranding of the channel, of the podcast, because to be honest, guys, I feel like, this podcast offers something truly special and unique, not just in who we have as panel members, and what they bring to the table in whatever field they are experts in, whether it's being passionate gamers or more technical experts in software engineering or even game developing, but also the fact that they are from all over the world. They are all different members of the PlayStation community, and yet they all come from vast majority, like different walks of life, from Japan, or Africa, America, Montenegro, Bosnia. That's the one. Bosnia, my dude. Sorry, I thought it was Montenegro, but you have Montenegrin blood, right? That's the one. Bosnia, the UK. It's awesome. Canada, our guest from Canada, and now Australia as well. And it's going to be an awesome show. Shout out to everybody in the chat tonight. We have Saltiest Gaming, my brother, Salty. So good to see you here. I'm sorry about your team. They lost the match, but apparently it was an awesome game. Your team did good, so they can hold their head up high. But we missed you on Thursday. But sorry it didn't work out. But it's great that you're here, my dude. Shout out to Toolman55. What's good, brother? Dark Queen Gaming. OT in the chat. Wilhelm in the chat as well. Book Roger, a loyal and regular supporter of this show. Appreciate you as always. Only on Xbox. He's a moderator. I know. I've got an Xbox fanboy as a moderator. I just like to be risky like that, But he's a cool dude. Shout out to him. Compost Smurf. Such great people here, man. And many more to come, no doubt. 18 watching so far. Shout out to all of you. Thank you for watching. Let's get this show on the road. We have an awesome panel tonight, guys. It's truly one to be excited for, because these guys really bring a lot to the table. So, with that said, let's introduce our special guests that we have on for this evening. Let's start off with Mayor Tech Rants. Tell us about yourself, my dude. It's awesome to have you here. I'm so glad that we were able to get you on the show. Oh shit, guys, sorry, I'm so sorry. We can't hear you talking. We can't hear the guest. Bear with me. Oh, you know what? The desktop audio isn't working right now. Let me fix it. Okay, let's try this. Guys, is the audio working? You guys speak now. Hello, test. No, no, that's still not working. Bear with me. Bear with me. Let's fix this. I'm very sorry, guys.
Oh, that's all
There
right.
we go. Now we have sound. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
And do I exist now?
we exist
So
now.
I,
We exist now.
I guess I'll just restart my my intro. I'm a PC enthusiast. I follow all sorts of news, like listening to the leaks and the speculation and analysis of what's going on. Anything you can game on PC consoles. My opinion is if there's a game that I want to play, I'm gonna acquire whatever platform I need to play that game. I don't really care what's what. You might say I have no loyalty in that sense, but whatever gets the job done in the end. My background is in computer science. I work with a company making HR software, so that's a lot of fun. But yeah, that's me, real quick.
That's awesome. And you're a software engineer, right? You work in computer science.
Right, that's correct.
That's awesome, dude. It's great that you're here. I really like your takes. I've listened I've watched a few of the things that you've posted, and I believe you were also on Moore's Law is Dead's podcast. Besides others.
I was on Broken Silicon number 47, talking mainly about the same thing that we'll be talking about today, actually.
Well, in that case, we definitely got you on at the right time. That's awesome.
I think so.
I'm very, very honoured that you're here. So thank you. Make
Oh,
sure
no
you
problem.
you guys
I'm honored to be here.
give Mayor Tech Rants a follow on Twitter. His name is the same as displayed on the panel. Definitely worth a follow. Speaking of worth a follow, HD Gamer. If you don't know HD Gamer, you don't deserve to be on Twitter. This guy is a legend in the gaming community. He has great takes, very insightful takes as well, with quite a nice complement of experience in certain fields when it comes to all things analytical. So HD Gamer, my dude, thank you for being here. We've been following each other for a long time. How are you, my guy? Tell us about yourself.
Wow, what an intro! Thanks, Wooly. Yeah, to be honest, I'm just excited to be here. I've been following a lot of you guys on Twitter, following your podcast, get to hear you all the time, and I'm just looking forward to being able to chat with you all, like regardless of being on the podcast. I just wanted to piggyback off what you said there about Mayor Tech Rants. I've been following him for a while too. He's got a really cool blog as well, technical blog you can follow. And I first heard of him on that Moore's Law is Dead podcast, where he was actually talking about this very topic, the SSD tech in gaming, which we'll get into. But yeah, my background, long-time gamer, been sort of gaming since the Atari 2600 days, probably when I first picked up a controller in, I think it was Missile Defense, probably the first game I played. Or first multiplayer game was this, I think it was called Tank Wars or something. It was like really pixelated mess, but fun back in the day. And then, sort of got moved into Nintendo, got the first sort of NES system, stayed with Nintendo until PlayStation, then sort of jumped into the PlayStation ecosystem, and since primarily been on the PlayStation platforms and PC. Dabbled with Xbox a little bit, but primarily PlayStation for the last few years at least. My background is not as relevant as Maya's background or even Leviathan's, but yeah, I've got an engineering background, physics background. Yeah, I do. I probably get a bit too analytical on Twitter sometimes, but it's just trying to pull that back a bit. But yeah, and just looking forward to having this conversation with you guys tonight. So
it's interesting that you said that about trying to pull it back with the trolling a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of, it's weird as I've slightly kind of gotten older, and now that the consoles have released, because leading up to the console releases, it was so exciting. It's like Death Stranding all over again. You know, it's always exciting. The most exciting part is the anticipation and speculation, right? And with that, you know, I released a load of videos on why I think the PS5 would be not more powerful but more capable, and it really dragged me into that console war. And I'm still all for the console wars. I think console wars are healthy as long as they're not turned into toxic fanboyism, and you're not incapable of reason, right? But at the same time, as now that the consoles have been out for nearly a year now, and as we I feel like I'm older. I feel like lockdowns made me age a little bit. I don't know, man. It's like I'm able to appreciate more kind of things from a slightly greener perspective. I'm still obviously very PlayStation orientated. I love my PlayStation 5 and gaming PC, but I think owning a gaming PC as well as I don't know, changed my perspective a little bit. I don't know about you guys with that. But
I'm honestly mainly a PC gamer. I play PlayStation because there's games on it that I want to play. It's pretty straightforward. If there's a game that I want to play, I'll get the console, and that's PlayStation has some fantastic games. Same with Nintendo.
yeah, quality is just next level. Finally, you know, I've got hope that we're seeing quality from Forza. And Halo seems to have been improved significantly. There are still things that need a lot of work, but I think we'll be diving into that later. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an exciting time to be a gamer, and I don't mean that from a petty neutral way. I mean that from finally we're actually seeing a decent game being put out by Xbox with Forza Horizon in what seems like a long time. So it's pretty exciting stuff. But yeah, no, I hear you, bro, and I agree. PC gaming on PC has its own amazing kind of feel to it. I'm playing this Breakpoint right now on PC. This gameplay that you're seeing here. Moving on to the panel. Thank you very much to the two guests, HD Gamer and Mayatech, for joining us. Let's get on with the panel intros. We have Leviathan Gamer. It has been a long time since you were last on with us because you've had COVID and you've been extremely ill, and to be frank, you still sound pretty terrible, if you don't mind me saying. But I'm so happy you're here, my guy. I'm glad you're not dead. I'm glad you're alive and relatively well and through the worst of it. With a slightly manly, husky voice now to complement your knowledge and wisdom. So how are you? How are you feeling, my dude? Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to be back. I'm still obviously sick, but life has to go on eventually at some point. So yeah, so I'm Leviathan Gamer. I'm a computer engineer who specifically focuses on computer architecture and designing CPUs and GPUs from like the hardware level. That's primarily what I do, but I do a lot of programming as well. Like, for example, I'm tutoring some freshmen today on Java programming as I work towards getting a PhD eventually. At some undefined date at this point. But yeah. A
PhD consisting of lots of Monster energy drinks, Red Bull, caffeine, and zero sleep. Knowing you?
Yeah, I've been working on getting my caffeine addiction down. Like, I still drink like 300 milligrams of caffeine a day. But that's... Like, I was pushing towards like the 500 milligram range, and that was definitely not healthy.
No.
So I'm slowly detoxing over the course of this next year.
You're slowly making your lifespan and longevity a little longer. Just think, bro, more years to play Halo.
Yeah.
And more years to wait for the next one. So, bad joke. And yeah, all you calling me a neutral in the chat, I see you. I'm no neutral. Blech, don't knock me sick. Anyway, moving on to my good friend and brother OT. How are you, my guy? OT, the dude, has he fallen asleep? For those who don't know,
Yeah.
OT has some awesome news to tell us. I am so happy for you. I cried when I saw the picture. Tell us, bro. Tell us about your awesome news.
Yay. So I got my baby. My baby girl came a bit early. She came on Monday around 6:30. It was crazy, man. The whole delivery process. There were a few complications. Next thing I know, I'm being part of the medical team because they had to rush and they needed help. So I had to help deliver in some ways. And it was like we nearly lost her at one point. But hey, God came through. God came through. So they saved at the last minute. So for me, she's like a miracle baby, you know. So I'm just glad she's alive, and I don't know. It's just a special feeling. I can't describe what I'm feeling, but it's just beauty and love.
Bro, I have never seen a baby girl with eyes like her. She has the most beautiful big eyes I've ever seen. I can't believe how big her eyes are. They're just like she's almost like a cartoon. Her eyes are that big, but they are so beautiful.
You know, she was born with her eyes open.
That's amazing.
So when she came out, her eyes were open, and I was just like, is that normal? Because I thought babies take days, but for some reason she came out with her eyes open.
Wow.
Even crying. She didn't even need to be hid.
That's incredible, dude. She's gonna be a special lady, just like a mother. And hats off to you, my guy. I'm so proud and happy for you. You did good, brother, and you're here when you should be sleeping. So even more credit to you. Like, you've not slept a wink in like the whole week, and it must be you must be absolutely exhausted. So the fact that you're here, even for just an hour or however long you can spare, it's a blessing, bro. So thank you. It means a lot.
No problem. No problem, bro.
Wilhelmovski, my dude. It's great that you're here as always. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous. I've currently beaten Half-Life
Oh, sweet.
and Half-Life. And what can I say? It deserves it deserves that the status it has. Like it's an amazing game. It's like the thing it executed. It still executes so well. It's a game that's just as effective nowadays as it was back in the day. A scene to me that especially stuck out to me was the part where you were at the dam and that helicopter chased you. And the thing is why I think that part was so brilliant is because it when you then picked up that rocket launcher, the RPG, and then shot that helicopter off, it felt earned. It was like a journey in of itself. Shooting down that helicopter. You were chased by that thing, went through the sewers, and then you dealt with some bullshit in the desert. Then climbed some ladders, and took out the soldiers there. And then when you finally made it on top, you picked up the RPG, aimed at that damn helicopter that chased you for like what felt like a decade, and then just shoot it down. It's such a geniusly crafted scene, and the scene that most modern games wouldn't do as well, because they'd probably either solve that whole thing with a cutscene or give you the RPG right away. Like, that moment was so brilliantly crafted, and I'm seriously excited to experience more Half-Life. I want to play Opposing Force and Blue Shift, and after that Half-Life 2 and Episode 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. And then Black, what's it called? Half-Life.
Alex.
No,
but I don't have.
There was a
Lost Coast.
No, there was Lost Coast, but there was also
Black Mesa.
Black Mesa.
Black Mesa. I want to experience that too. Yeah, the remake.
Yeah.
I want to see how they fixed Zen, because Zen was really like it was okay. The first half of it was okay, but then it kind of pissed me off. But otherwise, Half-Life is still an amazing game. And I've also finally beaten No More Heroes 3. And what I love so much about No More Heroes 3 is that it's Suda 51 pure as it can be. It's like unapologetically Suda, which is so refreshing because for the past years Suda has only had like these co-writer, co-director, or producing roles. Some games under his belt weren't like completely 100%, him. So having like finally a game where Suda could just get wild, get manic is so felt so good because he's really a creative man. He's really like one of the most creative developers working today. And then seeing him getting full creative control, like seeing that publishers and all don't set a limit to the playground of his creativity is so great because like people like him work the best. Artists in general work the best when you don't set boundaries to their vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. Half-Life is a special series, man. It's a special series, and to this day it continues to dominate in terms of quality. Like Half-Life Alyx is something else. I can't wait to play it. I've still not got a VR headset, but that will soon change. And when I get PSVR 2, when that comes out, I'm pretty damn sure Valve are going to make a port over to PlayStation for Half-Life Alyx. It has to.
Also, OT, congrats again for your newborn. It's beautiful, and with the things.
Thank you so much.
With all the coincidence, all the stories you've told, like I'm convinced your life is a David Lynch film, but not like one of those fucked up David Lynch films. It's like David Lynch wanted to make a beautiful film.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
All these guys in the chat, right? Pack it in. I see you all, right? You're turning this into a more sweaty Xbox fanboy orgy than you would see on Dealer Gaming's podcast, for real. Like, this is like RDX crew times a million right now. It's sickening. No, I'm only kidding, but you guys are hilarious. Shout out to Retro Family Man Gamer for currently, until it's beaten, the funniest comment of the night so far. Buck Rogers said, "The Switch is the only system built for rooftop parties," and Retro responded, "Until you drop it." Facts. Absolute facts, and I love it. No, great that you're all here. Sadly, Akira must be in spaces. I think he's truly succumbed and become overwhelmed to the addiction of spaces. But
his own InfoWars going on.
Shout out to him. Unfortunately, he's not here right now, but hopefully he can make it at some point. But it's great that you're all here.
I don't think he's on Spaces. Actually, I can't see him on Spaces.
Well, I hope he's okay. Bloody hell! If he's not in Spaces, then where is he? Because that's he's only ever in Spaces. If he's not in Spaces, where is he?
He's probably just admiring the architecture of the PS5.
Probably, yeah. Absolutely. Or watching a juicy dev commentary on a Japanese survival horror game. No, but shout out to him. Hopefully he can jump in at some point. But yeah, let's get this show on the road. Shout out to Curtis in the chat. What's good? Glad that you're here. We are all good on our side. Glad you are good on your side. So the topics for tonight, folks, are PlayStation and PC. Is it a day-and-date future? Our main subject of the evening is SSD tech, why power is not the game changer. Because it was all about power, but Sony said otherwise. And sure enough, what he's saying is kind of ringing true. There is a lot more to next-generation gaming than T-flops, but we'll get into that. We're going to look into Halo, the good, the bad, and the unknown, and uncertain. And also we're going to have a look at this recent outrage concerning Ghost Runner. Why is it seemingly underperforming on Xbox Series X? Why is it only hitting between 40 and 55-ish FPS in ray tracing mode and struggling with the 120 mode as well. We will get into that. So what topic should we start with first, guys? Should we get God of the War and Day and Date out the way? Do you reckon? Should we get that subject out the way?
I feel like that might be a fun place to start.
Yeah, me too. Let's do it. I'm feeling lucky. Right, so I've said a lot on this. I've got a video on my YouTube channel, which this podcast itself is on as well, explaining why I don't think this spells Day and Date for PC. But I could be wrong, but I do think there are too many variables to consider that argue against that being the goal of PlayStation right now. But I want to hear from you guys before I give my thoughts. I want to hear about you guys. Do you think Sony PlayStation is headed for the same model as Xbox? A Day and Date on PC and PlayStation? And what do you think the implications of that would be? Would that be good for you as a consumer? Would it be good for the games? Would it be good for the brand? What are your or are they doing something different? And is that
I don't think there's a chance in hell. just gonna lob that out there right away. I think it would be good for particularly for PC gaming if they did. I think it would have questionable impacts to PlayStation's brand, but I think that releasing God of War on PC is a highly calculated move. That's meant to... It's a move that, they're going to get some extra sales, but I don't think they care that much about that. I think what they care about, particularly with God of War and the timing of its launch, what they're doing is they're hoping a bunch of PC gamers pick it up, play it, go, oh man, I want to see what happens next. Oh look, sequel's coming out on PS5, PS4. I gotta play it, right? It's a calculated move. The intention is 100% seeding the game, seeding that interest in PC gamers to say, hey, look what we've got over here. You want to get a PlayStation because you could get all these games much faster. See what we have over here? Yeah, come on over here. That's what they're doing. 100% that's what they're doing. And if they did Day and Date, it would just be... It would destroy that entire... that strategy that they have. It would make no sense at all, given their current strategy, to move to Day and Date.
Keep talking, bro. I'm listening. I'm 100% all ears, but I'm just going to go AFK for 10, 15 seconds.
Sure. So, yeah, I just don't see it. Maybe someone disagrees with me, but...
I share the same... Oh, Leviathan, go ahead.
Yeah, so first, to understand why would a company go Day and Date, we have to consider the market, right? There's really 5 gaming groups that would be impacted by PlayStation going Day and Date on PC, right? There'd be the group of PlayStation gamers that play on PlayStation out of convenience, right? That wouldn't care that games go Day and Date on PC. So that group will not move.
Right.
And they won't jump to PC ever. They just want the easy convenience. Then there's group 2, which is people that don't want to put in the effort in terms of cost of trying to build the most optimally efficient, cheapest PC. So they're cost constrained because a PlayStation 5 is much cheaper than a PC. So that group probably won't jump onto PC. So they wouldn't lose market share there. Then there's group 3, which would be PlayStation gamers that are willing to make the jump to PC because they will no longer have a reason to own a PlayStation if they can just get all their games on PC, because PC will have the better graphics, better technology, over time. So that group is where they lose console sales, but that they don't care much about console sales. They really care about third-party sales. So that'd be a drop in profits there. Then there's group 4, which is people that already own a PC and a PlayStation that play multi-plat games on PC and then play the exclusives on PlayStation. That might dip console sales, but that doesn't matter too much to them. And they're not getting the third-party sales anyways in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's group 5, which is the PC gamers that refuse to get a PlayStation for the exclusives that would then buy in. So like once we realized there's really 2 different markets, there's the people dropping PlayStation for third-party sales and new first-party money that they'd get. Like you can kind of see why, at least for Xbox, they made the jump for day and date there, because the third-party sales was not as much of a dip. And they're also like have deals with like Steam in the back end because of Windows. So like for Xbox, it made much more sense to go day and date.
I mean, sorry, I just want to interject one little point. We see with Xbox, they just recently did a shareholders call, and we got some of their financials, and they announced that their third-party sales are shrinking massively, and it's mainly dominated by first-party sales, which is where they're making their money now. So it's just a completely different strategy from PlayStation, given that day and date makes a lot more sense for them, since they're about maximizing their first-party sales, don't care as much about third-party.
Also, a thing that I think speaks for your for the point you made before is that Sony has only ported some of the older PS4 titles like Horizon, God of War, and Days Gone. You know, they don't have plans of as of now to port any PS5 games or something like that.
Yeah, for me, I think it's just all about the money. So, what incentive did Microsoft have to put games day and date on PC? I personally think, but I do not have the facts because Microsoft do not release data. But I think their first-party sales were also dipping. I think to some degree, outside of, let's say, something like Halo, I think people were not buying. That last generation was terrible for Microsoft when it comes to software sales. So they had no choice. So it wasn't let's just be friendly to the consumer. Every company operates from a need to make money. There is no advantage unless your consumers were not buying enough of the game. Now, on Sony's side, it makes no sense to put their games day and date on PC because of, number one, the number of people who are probably going to say, I'll just play the superior version, which is PC. Because even look at Wooly. Wooly's got a powerful PC, and now it's making him think, where do I buy the game? Now he has to ponder about that. And that means Sony will not make third-party sales from if Wooly buys a PC version. So why would Sony do that? Second, if predominantly playing third-party games on PC, it means you no longer most likely need PSN. So that is a massive contribution to Sony's profits. Even Xbox, maybe they might not want to admit it, but the people who are hooked onto Xbox Live contribute a massive amount of the profits to the Xbox division. And that is why Phil had no choice and he attempted to double the price, because that would have really inflated his profits. But you see, anytime you put games day and date on PC, now somebody doesn't need to get Xbox Live, because on PC you don't even need to pay. So I believe Xbox had to do it out of survival. And I think Sony is doing what Leviathan said. It's simply to entice. It is strategic. God of War is coming out on PC before the PS5 release. There will be some PC guys who will get a PS5 for that. And every game they release, it's simply to entice. But day and date makes no financial sense.
Facts.
Yeah, the only reason.
Yeah, I'd agree.
The only reason.
Sorry, Lev. You go and then we'll hear HD Gamer.
Yeah, so the only reason I could see them going day and date is to try to fight back against any like monopoly regulation hitting PlayStation, because they're getting close to technically counting as a monopoly. Because especially if Xbox stopped making consoles, because technically the Switch can count as a handheld, PlayStation could get hit by monopoly regulations. And one way they could get around that would be, well, we're releasing on our competitor's platform. We have competition. It's PC.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so like if Xbox stops making consoles, they're at risk of hitting that monopoly laws.
I somewhat disagree with that. I don't think that PlayStation would get hit by monopoly laws, or basically because what we see happening with Apple and Epic Games. I don't know if you guys follow that, but basically, like Epic Games, they did sort of win a little bit, but by and large, Apple won the lawsuit, which basically said that them running exclusive payments on their app store, and like exclusive software, all of whatever, there's no legal problem with that, apparently. So we've learned, according to U.S. courts.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like PlayStation has a lot stronger of a case than even Apple did, sort of regardless of what the competition's doing.
The only thing that I would add to that in Leviathan's defense is that that's merely profiting on another person's licensed and owned store, right? So exclusively, it's not taking the content away from that store. Whereas with PlayStation, Leviathan has alluded to this in the past, and it does make sense. It's becoming the go-to place for all devs, because the more devs that make their games for PlayStation, and the greater the player base grows on PlayStation, the harder it is for Microsoft to gain any attraction for those devs to make an exclusive for their platform, because they know their game isn't going to sell nearly anywhere near the numbers that it would sell on PlayStation. So it becomes a snowball effect, and eventually, if Microsoft do become just a third-party publisher, which seems like the direction they're going with all these services going onto TVs and fridges and, I don't know, your pet dog's collar and all this shit, it seems like it would get to the point then where, well, that's one more competitor out of the situation. So now PlayStation gain even more of a snowball, and so I see both sides. I see both, but what you're both saying, and it is a point that I've not considered before, really, and I think that's a great point. That how would they kind of answer this if that is the case? What I will want to say before HD Gamer goes is I want to ask, after HD Gamer has spoken and said his piece, I would love you guys to consider the question: do you think Sony is fully aware of any potential impact this would have to the quality of their games? Because think about this, right? If a game is to go to PC day one across the board, if all Sony's games were to go to PC day one, that would inevitably mean that they would want those games to sell on PC. So the spec for those PC games would be lowered in order for it to be accessible to more PC gamers. I.e., we're not talking about a PC that can equivalently kind of brute force 8,000 megabytes per second of raw data from a GPU to a GPU from an SSD. And I'm saying 8,000 because, taking into compression tech, it could be 20,000 if optimized correctly. So like there would be a huge bottleneck that PC tech currently hasn't released anything to counteract, and even if it did, would be so expensive that these games that would leverage PS5 hardware exclusively would require PCs that are so expensive that those games would not sell anyway. So it would directly counter and work against exclusive PlayStation titles being of anywhere near the quality that they could be if they were made exclusively for PS5 at this time that we're in now. So I don't know if that makes any sense, and if you guys want to touch on that after, but I'd love to hear what HD Gamer has to say first, and then, I don't know, mull that over.
Yeah, great. Some really interesting points there, and I think you're right, Wooly. There's kind of two perspectives to it. So there's the business sort of perspective and the perspective of game development. So, you know, I'm not going to add too much more. I don't think anyone else hasn't touched on, but yeah, it's just from the pure business perspective, you'd have to consider PlayStation's current business model and where they make the majority of their revenue. And, you know, we've seen a few of their recent reports, you know, last quarter, their breakdown, you know, 50% was from digital software and add-on content, 16 from network, 34 from hardware and others. And the previous year it was 60% from digital software add-on, 14 from network, and 26 from hardware. So if you consider that, they also give you a breakdown of the third-party, the software, the actual unit sales. So if you look at the unit sales from FY 2020, third-party software sales accounted for 83% of all software sales, and the first-party software accounted for 17%. So, you know, they get more revenue from a first-party title than a third-party title, but they still get, I think it's approximately 30% of the cut from the third-party sale. So if you break that down, run those numbers, it looks like, you know, third-party software would probably account for 60% of all the software revenue. First party would account for roughly 40% software revenue. You know, you add that up into those totals I just gave you from network, services, digital software, hardware, others. You're looking at first party software only accounting for roughly 24% of all their revenue. So, you know, that's 76% of their revenue comes from other sources other than first-party software sales. So to me, when I look at that, that looks like a console gamer on average is roughly 4 times as profitable as a PC gamer would be, because the PC gamer is primarily only buying a first-party software. Like, they can contribute to the network services, but I think, as we said, like, I don't think the primary revenue stream for network services is PS Plus, and I don't even know if you can get PS Plus on PC. I don't think there'd be anywhere near the demand, because PC gamers are used to playing online games for free. They're not going to pay for online. I don't think the PS Plus collection would be a big enough driver for that, and PS Now is kind of, you know, still in its infancy. So I just don't. I think the only revenue that they get from a PC player is the first-party software.
HD Gamer, you said something really profound just before that made OT go, wow. I'm sorry to ask this of you, but the chat's going crazy, and just so that people get the chance to hear again what it is you said, because what you said is pretty profound. Could you just run that by us again, just summarize it? Yeah,
so I mean, I've got links to this. It's from their sort of latest earnings call. So they give you a breakdown per division of where they're making their revenue. So digital software and add-on content, this is for last year, 2020. Digital software and add-on content was 60%, network services 14%, hardware and others is 26%.
Right.
So you have to run the numbers a bit, but they also give you, there's an additional information slide they give you, which will give you the breakdown of total software sales and also first-party software sales. So from that, you can kind of derive how many third-party software sales there are. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, it looks like just pure numbers, you know, FY 2020, there was 58.4 million, you know, first-party software sales and 280 million third-party software sales. So if you do the percentages, that's 83% third-party software, 17% first-party software.
Wow.
And then you try and take into account like the revenue. So I've just assumed, you know, if you assume first-party software is giving you 100% revenue, third-party software is only giving them 30% of that revenue. If you run
it works out about the same, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it works out to be, as I said, like third-party software. If you looked at just software revenue, third-party games that account for 60% of that software revenue, and first-party would account for 40% of the software revenue.
That's crazy.
But But as I said, there's those other revenue streams, and I don't think you get those from a PC gamer. So you don't get the network
No.
services as larger amount or hardware
Exactly.
and others.
And by going
For
PC
all-
day one, they'd be directly cannibalizing their
Well,
service
yeah,
profit, because
Exactly.
they'd be disincentivizing people to buy a PS5 because PlayStation Network costs, right?
Yeah, for sure. And
That's,
I looked at
that's
like,
an amazing point, bro. Like, fuck me, this panel is lit, guys. This panel is lit. Like, you're all bringing so much specialty to the table.
yeah. Like, a couple other points to make from that. Like I was just having a look online. I think Frontline Gamer. He's a great one to follow. Gives a lot of interesting facts there, and he's
a very knowledgeable
recently,
guy.
Yeah, he's actually a dev as well. So
Yeah, I've heard.
really good to listen to.
He's a good one to follow for sure.
Yeah, he's saying maybe 1/4 to 1/5 of PS gamers own a PC, and Matt Piscatella recently said, I think from an older study, that 33% of PS players in the US, PC players in the US, own a PS4.
I've been saying this.
own
I've been saying this.
Yeah.
HDG. I've been saying that PlayStation 5 is nigh essential to PC gamers as much as PC is very, very desirable to PlayStation gamers, right? And the reason for that is, well, I see all the time, rate my rig, how's my rig, and they've got a PS5 right next to a PC. And a lot of the time I don't see an Xbox there, but go figure, an Xbox is basically a PC, albeit not as powerful as my PC. It cost me 1,800 quid, but for that, I've got roughly, I'd say probably about 1.8 times the power of an Xbox Series X. I've got a 3070. I've got an i5 600K and 32 gigabytes of RAM. So probably probably 2 times the power overall if you include the RAM. So why would I buy an Xbox?
There's a huge crossover, I think, between the utility of Xbox and PC, so that's why. And look, what I was saying there is, if you've got 33% of PC players in the US own a PS4, that's tens of millions of gamers that have both. And I mean, I agree with what Leviathan said with how he split up those two groups. Or the multiple groups. There'll be some people who are never interested in PC. It's too much trouble for them. There are some people who are never going to be interested in console. But I think from those figures, 33% of PC players own a PS4. That's tens of millions of people. And I think if they're primarily on PC and getting a PlayStation just to play the exclusives, day and date release sort of strategy removes that incentive for them. Then they're like, well, why do I need a PlayStation then? And especially since Xbox is all day and date, you can get both Xbox and PlayStation first-party titles on PC day and date.
Yeah.
People may not, jump in and get a PlayStation console in future. So I think Leviathan says it's ultimately a trade-off. We don't really know the numbers, like what impact day and date would have on their sales. So it's that balance between, you get an increase in your revenue from your first party sales from day and date, but you lose those other revenue streams you would from the console gamer. So it's
potentially long-term quality as well.
Well that's what I said. There's the development too, but it's how many console sales will they lose? We don't know, but it's for them to go day and date. The increase in their first party software revenue would have to outweigh the lost revenue. So, and I mean, it's even a harder sell too, because they get revenue now from their staggered release strategy. So a day and date release strategy would have to show a significant benefit over that staggered release that they're doing, where they're releasing their older games. So
it's true, bro. You make amazing.
Sorry, there's so much to say about it too.
No,
amazing points.
Sorry. Incredible. Go on, OT. Sorry.
I mean,
I was just saying amazing points. But just to add one more thing, I think a lot of these Xbox guys who keep on saying Sony's going to do a day and date need to ask themselves if there's any evidence that that strategy does not produce more profits, it's the fact that Microsoft has been using it for years and is still making less than half the profits of Sony. So they need to back up their statements with facts. Show me that Microsoft is half the sales of PS5 or PS4 and is maybe making 75% the profits of Sony. Then I would be like, okay, I see. But even still, they're making less than half. The strategy does not seem to be generating the profits they're claiming.
It's self-cannibalizing, bro. They offer alternatives rather than complements and supplements. And whereas PlayStation, it's all consolidated back to, look at remote play. It goes back to owning a PlayStation 5 in order to use remote play. But the quality for cloud enthusiasts, however few there are, is huge. It's 1080p, it's more stable, blah, blah, blah. I'm not interested in it. I couldn't give two shits because I'm not a cloud enthusiast. I don't like cloud gaming at all. But nevertheless, you still need a PS5 to use it. And it's same with double dipping on PC. Yes, PlayStation PC gamers get God of War. They don't get God of War Ragnarok day one, and I've heard the rumour, but rumours always seem to leak conveniently, and a lot of them tend to be false, right? Ragnarok's not launching day one on PC. That's just a fact. The quality of that game hasn't been compromised by PC. Has it been compromised by PS4? Yes, no doubt. But hey, regardless, it's not compromised by going to PC day one. And I just want to add that I wasn't raising the issue about why own an Xbox for the sake of console wars. I was mostly raising it just to mention that I see a lot of people, particularly on Twitter, claiming that PC gamers don't need a PlayStation. Nobody needs anything gaming related. Gaming's a hobby, but if a PC owner wants to play God of War Ragnarok after playing God of War 2018 on release, they will need a PlayStation to do that, whether it's a PS4 or a PS5. And that is what matters.
If I could just finish up there and I'll pass it on to someone else. Just that was the summary, I thought, from the business sort of side. As far as evidence, like as you said, Woolley, I don't think there's any evidence to suggest they are. I think a lot of the pushback or the encouragement from Xbox sort of fans on why PlayStation will go day and date, I think it validates Xbox's strategy to them. You know, Sony must be doing it because Xbox is doing it. Xbox is, in their minds, the market leader. And they can't sort of accept the possibility that there may be any downside to Xbox's strategy. And, you know, if we look from other sort of sources, there's so many sources saying it's not likely to happen. I mean, we might touch on that, but that Jim Ryan interview, everyone took that to being day and dates happening, I know. And like, if you listen to just the last 30 seconds, you could interpret that. Yep, the only way he's going to reach more gamers is day and date release on PC. It's happening. But he talks about 5 other sort of factors or ways that they're going to increase the appeal of their games, reach more people. And I think that was a key sort of difference in their strategies, that PlayStation seems to be trying to make their games more appealing, not just appeal to a wider audience, not just release their games to a wider audience. So, I think there's that. And then, from many sources, Frontline Gamers, another one, saying it's not going to happen for a number of reasons. Herman Holst, PlayStation will still remain the best place to play at launch. David Jaffe still thinks it doesn't make sense. And Sean Layden outlined in that interview with Persona and Jay Barry that he doesn't think it's ever
Great shout,
happen.
dude.
And,
great shout.
Great. Awesome. So, maybe talk about the development. There's the development issues, and I'll touch on that after, like why you want to do the day and date PC releases for Dell.
Go for it. Who wants to jump in? Maya, go for it, dude.
I have a potentially controversial take outlining. I still don't think it's going to happen. Like, keep that in mind. This is purely speculative, just for discussion. But there is a way that the chances are greater that it could happen, and it relates directly to when you launched this section of the conversation. You were talking about the quality of the PS5 versus the specs of the PC, and when devs launch games on PC, they develop the game for the lowest common denominator. That's common development. That's how, you know, they set a standard, and that's the hardware that they need the game to run on. And if that standard is mid-range PC, current mid-range PC, that's notably lower than the capabilities of the PS5. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that because of the SSD tech. But also in some cases, even the hard or the GPU. But so right now, games that are coming out on the PS5 are already making that compromise by developing for the lowest common denominator, which is the PS4. But that's going to end here pretty soon.
Yep.
But moving forward, the PC does have an avenue in which it can catch up. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it has to do with the velocity architecture, specifically the direct storage API is coming to PC. It's not there yet, but it's coming with Windows 11. Actually, it might already be in there with the recent release of Windows 11. I'm not entirely sure about that, but and data compression that's seen on the PS5 is present in the latest graphics cards, so like RDNA 2 and Ampere GPUs.
They're finally going to be on par, at least minimum, on par with PS5's bandwidth capabilities.
But only if it's used properly. And as far as I know, there's no current games that are actually planning on using it. I'm sure there are, but there's none that have been announced to make use of the velocity architecture. But I think it'll happen eventually. But you're absolutely right. Like, this is RDNA 2 and Ampere. Most gaming GPUs, or most gaming PCs do not have that. You know, to hit PS5 storage speeds, they would need a quality RDNA 2 or Ampere GPU along with an NVMe SSD,
and a
which
shit ton
again
of RAM.
and yeah, with probably 32 gigs of RAM, I imagine, maybe even 16 in some cases might be able to pull it off. I'm not sure about that, to be honest.
I imagine Ratchet and Clank would only require 16. But I reckon any more ambitious titles. I mean, you can run Ratchet and Clank off a 3200, right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that. That I could see that happening. But anyway, what I'm leading up to is if PlayStation were to adopt a day and date, what they would the way that they would go about doing it is probably not optimizing it for your low-end mid-range PC, but just saying, you know what, there are PCs capable of running this. Since they don't care that much about the game sales. They're not releasing the games on PC to make more money on them from PC. Right. So they're going to be a lot more likely to say, you know what, screw the low end and the mid-range. We're going to release this, and you will be able to play it on PC if you have the latest hardware, the high-end hardware that's capable of pulling it off. And
Which
if you
would
don't,
make PS5 more desirable. That's genius,
right,
bro.
Because not only there's multiple tiers here. If this is expensive stuff, so a lot of people are thinking, oh man, it's people that weren't looking at it just assuming that it was going to be on PS5 aren't thinking about it. But if it's launching on PC, now they're thinking about it. Now they're looking at their PC thinking, oh man, I could play that game, but my PC isn't fast enough. But now they're interested in the game, and they start looking at what it's going to cost to upgrade their PC. They start looking at the cost of the PS5, and they start thinking, man, maybe I'm going to get a PS5.
God, bro. Oh my days. My mind is blown. That is so clever because that perfectly harmonizes with Leviathan's point about so they can respond and say we're not monopolizing at all, but at the same time, PlayStation games would be the next crisis. It would be and they would be a phenomenon in the gaming space, and the PS5 would be held to even higher esteem in terms of mind share because the PS5 can do what only the highest end PCs are capable of that only less than 1% of PC owners have. That's crazy, bro. I've never thought of that.
That being said, that strategy wouldn't last forever. That would only last for a couple years until that hardware becomes more and more and more common. But also that would effectively have the same strategy that they have now. So if there was a period of a year and a half, maybe 2 years where they were doing that, then the PC gamers that were holding out, didn't buy a PlayStation. They would just wait longer. A couple years later, now this hardware is cheaper. They can pick it up used. It's more accessible. They're upgrading their PC anyway. Now they have access to those games later than everyone else, the same way they do now. Now they're seeing how good those games are. Now they're looking at PS5 again.
I hear you. What do you guys think to that? Are your minds as blown as mine?
I was going to say pretty much the same.
Oh, sorry.
thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
Leviathan, speak.
Yeah, so I was pretty much just going to say the same thing. That's exactly what I was going to say, is they don't necessarily have to target a very low-end PC, but then they pay the consequences of that, which would be less sales. But if that's not really an issue for them, then that doesn't really matter, right? Like,
exactly.
Let's be real. Cyberpunk 2077 targeted a much higher specs than the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 could handle. Like, they weren't designing for those platforms. They were basically porting it down to those platforms. They were designing that game for PC, and they paid the consequences of that, right? If you want to play it on the lower end hardware, you're going to have a very shitty experience. So they would have to consider, is it worth making these low-end PCs play this game very poorly? Well, does that really matter to them? If it doesn't matter, they can just say minimum specs are really high. You have to get that specs, or you're going to have to play this game at like 20 FPS and just live with it. Because there are people that will play on very low settings, and then those people are like buyer beware. You did it to yourself, pretty much.
I've seen people that can just play games on the worst experience, and they're just so used to it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting double digits frames. I'm happy. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, all I can say to that is, after hearing all of you guys talking, I feel like a dumbass, because all I thought was, it doesn't make sense for Sony to go day and date because they weren't that big into the PC game in the first place. But then all of you came with those grandiose theories that I wouldn't have come up with, and then I was like, what the fuck is going on now?
Yeah, I do want to kind of reinforce something that you said there. This is nothing more than a grandiose theory or speculation. I don't expect Sony to actually do it, but it would be kind of interesting if they did.
My one question would be that 1% is I think that is who Sony is actually targeting of PC gamers, those hardcore guys, because those guys spend money. So Sony would not be targeting the guys they don't think spend so much money. So if you give that hardcore gamer access to God of War Ragnarok on day one, I don't know. I think you miss out on quite a bit of profits. So that would be my only issue, because I think the more hardcore you are, that is the target these guys want to get. So giving that person the option not to get it on PS, because right now, from the statistics that were read, it is clear that PC guys are actually double dipping with a PS5 or a Sony product. And Sony is capitalizing on that. And take note, Sony said many guys who bought a PS5 were new. So I wonder, are some of those guys PC guys? Because if you even look at Ubisoft's financials, they actually saw a dip in PC, the amount PC gave them. And it's like that percentage went to the PS5. There might be a strategy of entice them and get them slightly.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely the strategy. I agree entirely.
Yeah. Shout out to the chat. We're getting a lot of Jonathans in the chat who are very pro PC Master Race. PS5 sucks. Shout out to you guys. You're doing the PC Master Lord's work.
So I think for me, looking at the chat as it's going by, I think we do need to discuss the IO at some point.
Let's do
we
it.
can finish this topic.
That's a great. Well, that's a smooth transition because we're going to be discussing this right now.
Right.
So the next topic of discussion is has everybody finished or what they want to say about the has everybody finished what they want to say about PC? I think it's kind of the general consensus among us, the panel anyway, that we don't see it ever being day and date. People are arguing in the chat, yeah, but Returnal has already been leaked for PC. Even if that leak is true, go figure. Returnal's already been out for how many months? 4, 5, 6 months. It will probably be a year until it, at least, before it actually leaks for releases on PC. It's not day and date. And the argument of right now is PlayStation going day and date? And that's the point. So let's keep it objective here, people. Later releases, later ports over to PC isn't in any way, shape, or form reinforcing your argument that games are going from now on day and date. From PlayStation games are now going to be day and date on PC. What we've done as a panel tonight is entertain that possibility, but also how would Sony deal with the consequences of that possibility becoming a reality. And I think that's what's made this discussion so fire, right? So awesome. So, but all these arguments in the chat about whether Returnal's going to be PC later down the line or any other PlayStation game that's already released on PlayStation, it's a moot point because we know we're getting PlayStation games releasing on PC after they've already released on PlayStation. So there's nothing new there, right? We know that. Mm-hmm. But if the panel has anything else to add before we move on.
Just going to add a couple of things, but it will lead into the SSD talk.
Awesome, let's do it.
I think I agree with Maya and Leviathan. Like that is their goal is to incentivize PC players to sort of double dipping on the content. And I mean, that's what we heard from Sean Layden. He sort of said exactly that with his analogy of, they're not coming to our house, so I'll have to go to their house and I'll bring some of our, best-selling game there to try and incentivize them to then explore other titles on the PlayStation sort of ecosystem. And I think Mo's got a point there, like the high-end PCs could probably handle these games, and eventually they definitely will be able to handle these games. The NVMe drives available on PC now, matching the speeds of the PS5. I think there's still some, Leviathan, I think I've spoke to him about this before, there's still some issues with, maybe achieving the efficiency, that throughput, because there's, a lot of other things in that IO complex, like, coherency engines, co-processors. And a big thing is that there's the compression tech, which is your Kraken compression. I think it was, I can't remember the other one that increases it even further. But there's also the decompression. I think Cerny mentioned that decompression block in the IO will take up to, I think it was 8 or 9 Zen 2 CPU cores just to decompress that data.
I think it was 9, if I remember.
Yeah, I think it was 9. So, I mean, your 12 core or 16 core PC may be able to spare 9 cores to do that, but I'm not sure. It may take a hit there. So, I mean, just quickly, so the development sort of issues there for your day and date, I think it's less costly to do a port than it is to co-develop. I think that's what Frontline Gamer sort of mentioned, that Sony's also looking to do a sort of longer tail end of their sales. And then you've got what you sort of talked about, Wooly, which was the quality kind of aspect there, where you're splitting the team's resources between multiple different sort of versions of the game then, and they've got sort of less time to optimize. So if you've got a fixed budget and time frame, they're going to have to spend less on each version of the game.
And then there's accessibility, the PC.
Yeah.
Are we designing this with a hard drive in mind, or with the PS5's SSD in mind,
And that's what I was going to lead into. So, they've got reduced time to sort of optimize for each single piece of hardware, and they've got less quality control, less time to iron out bugs. And we've got that from, I think, NXG, everyone's following him, but he sort of said, Moore's Law's dead. Biggest benefit of consoles has always been the ability to tailor make a game for a specific piece of hardware. And he, mentions this impacts PC massively because they have to deal with so many different configurations of hardware and specs. He also mentioned, not to have a dig at Microsoft, that Microsoft's path, the way they've chosen to do their SDK, limits their ability to get the most out of each individual piece of hardware. It makes it easier to develop for multiple pieces of hardware, but there's a loss in efficiency there. And we've got it from multiple devs too, like the Doom developers before they were bought up by Microsoft sort of made some comments about developing for the Series S and the Series X at the same time. I think there was an Activision dev had some comments about it, the Control devs. I think Chris Wright just brought up the Ubisoft Splinter Cell dev, talking about the multi-plat development. Even some of the Microsoft devs, Halo devs, sort of keep talking about trying to get this game ready for all the different hardware configurations and the difficulties. And even Todd Howard commented that the lack of, not releasing on PS5 was just one less version they had to deal with, and how that was a benefit. So the last thing was, that optimizing for the hardware. How will they, if you do multi-platform sort of development, you generally don't maximize what the hardware potential is. You don't utilize all the features. You kind of pick the lowest common denominator and build for that. And as Leviathan said, some devs like Cyberpunk have developed for PC and then tried to port down, and that didn't work out too well for them. So biggest hardware feature, the biggest gain we've had from the previous generation is not the GPU, it's not the CPU, it's actually the IO systems in both consoles. They've seen 100 times increase. So
100%.
Yeah. So that's it, and that can lead into the SSD and how that's going to benefit us all.
Take it away, my dude. That's an awesome lead in, and I just want to say, for just a quick comment, that tonight is lit, and the panel, like you guys, it's awesome hearing you all speak. I'm learning so much from you all, and I think I can reiterate what OT said when he just went, wow. I think he would agree. It's great listening to what you guys are bringing here tonight, and how you guys kind of are putting things into perspective in a way that I haven't thought of before. And that's what this show's all about. It's about diving in deep and considering the other side of a coin, but the third side of a coin, for example, because a lot of nuance goes amiss, especially on Twitter and in journalism and gaming news. So thank you to all of you guys for that. So the next point, why power is not the game changer. Do you guys agree with that statement, or is power all there is to it?
In my opinion, if our listeners can walk away with having one misconception thrashed.
Maya, you've just cut off. Maya, could you repeat that? You've just cut off for about 10 seconds.
Okay, so if our listeners can walk away from this podcast with one misconception having been thrashed, I would love for that to be the misconception that the main benefit of faster SSD is less time spent staring at a loading screen. To me, it's an obvious benefit, but also the least interesting in my opinion.
Mm.
But another misconception that's kind of gone the other way is that faster SSDs make your GPU better. That's not exactly true, but it can make your visuals much better. And Odie released, I think the tweet that kind of got HD Gamer and I both involved in this conversation was Odie put out a video.
Should I get that video up and play it?
You know what?
It was genius.
That's not a bad idea. He put it very well. A very good explanation of one of the big benefits.
So, OT, let's find your awesome. I'm just gonna get the screen up for you guys. Display screen. Okay. Minimize. Okay. Let me just pause this video. I've got gameplay being played right now in the background. Here we go. That's his daughter, by the way. His beautiful baby girl.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Let's find this. There we go. I'm trying to find.
Let me see. Damn.
This one.
You know what? Why don't you get? Oh, you found it, huh?
Is it PlayStation strength? Is sometimes its weakness.
No, not that one. Let me see. Why don't guys continue while we search for it?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah, sure. You know what? I actually have a blog post on the subject where I list. Oh, you found it?
I'm trying to find it. Let me type in OT SSD videos.
Okay.
Filters.
It's the rooms analogy, correct?
That
was a really good.
Yeah, that's the one.
Come up with to explain it.
Yeah, the room analogy.
Part 2 of why IO improves. Here we go. We've got it. Yes.
Awesome.
Get in. The problem is part 1 isn't there.
It must be in the retweet.
3 quote tweets. Nothing to see here yet. What's going on here?
Where did I put this?
Let me type in OT IO.
There we go. Through my retweet.
Have you found it? Have you guys found it?
No, not yet. I'm just going down the profile. Hey man, I've been active. Fuck.
I have no idea why, but I can't hear anything that's coming through the desktop audio. I don't know why. So I can't hear this video and what's being said. It's weird. OT, should we just get you to repeat what you said? Because sorry to hold all the guys up in the chat. We're trying to find
no problem. Let's see. Jeez, man, I'm also going through, and I'm just in shock, man. I must have. I just have too many things going on. But basically, what I was saying is, if wait, do you have it already?
Wait, who? Who are we talking?
Did you manage to find it?
I managed to find the second part, but I couldn't find the first part, so it wasn't part of the retweet. I don't know why. So
Okay. Anyway, so what I was saying was, if you go to the PS1 era, and any era between PS1 and PS4, the GPU sometimes is not being maxed. So when you look at, let's say I'm in a room, and let's say I'm on the PS4. If I use all the PS4's energy to render a room,
I'm an idiot, dude. It was you wrote 2-part video. You didn't write part 2 of the video. I do have it.
Oh, that's.
I do.
Okay.
I do have it. I'll play it for you guys.
Yeah.
Because it's awesome, and you need to hear this. But just let me know if you guys can hear it, because for whatever reason, I've got no audio coming through on my desktop. So let me know if you can hear this. Hold on. Okay. I'll pause this. Right. Can you guys hear this?
I don't hear anything through Discord.
Let me check if like Charles can hear it.
Just let me know if you guys can hear it.
Because the YouTube is a little bit behind.
Can you guys hear this? No, nobody can hear it. Bastard. I don't know what's going on here. For whatever reason, I've got no audio. Like the audio's up, but it's not.
Let's just let Udi try to explain it again.
Here we go. I've got it fixed.
Or if you got it, okay.
I've got it fixed. Are you ready? Let's do this.
Yo, I want to give an educational video on why the SSD and I/O system is so important concerning visuals. This is something a lot of people say is not true. They say the SSD has no impact whatsoever on visuals. What do I do?
I can hear my own voice being played back. Sorry.
For a living, architectural visualization focusing on 3ds Max and Unreal Engine 5. This is something I'm doing that's just rendering a draft for a client. But anyway, this has given me some insight into what game devs, some of the challenges they face in trying to render games to maximum quality. Now, imagine this is a room. 4 walls, chairs, tables, etc. I'm rendering it on the PS1.
Guys, is there still no audio? Still no audio. Let me just double check. Sorry guys for this. People are saying still no audio. Oh no, there is audio. Sorry guys, forgive me for interrupting. I'll continue.
In trying to render games to maximum quality. Now, imagine this is a room. 4 walls, chairs, tables, etc. I'm rendering it on the PS1. I am trying to max out the quality of the visuals on a PS1. So I use all my RAM on room 1. Suddenly I open the door to room 2. Do you know what's going to happen? I open that door. I'm going to find that there was no information concerning room 2 on the RAM. And the disk was too slow to provide the RAM with the information it needed for room 2. So what do I see when I open the door? Nothing. The textures are not there, the objects are not there, and then suddenly, after a few seconds, boom, I start to see pop up. The textures start to come in, the objects start to stream in. This is a major problem that has persisted from PS1 generation to PS4. It's been getting better with time. But the solution they have had is, in order to mitigate this problem, let us store the data of room 2 and 1 on RAM, which causes a problem. So suddenly I'm reducing the quality of textures in room 1. I'm reducing the polygon meshes in room 1 because these are taking too much of a big footprint on RAM. So because the RAM does not have a good I/O system or SSD backing it, it has to store more information on RAM than it needs to. Even though you're not even looking into room 2. Room 2 is stored in RAM. because the developers will always want RAM than it has to store more information on RAM than it needs to, even though you're not even looking into room 2. Room 2 is stored in RAM, because the developers will always they are always worried if you open that door, you need to see what's going on in room 2. So this brings us to the new generation of games, PS5, Xbox Series X. These machines were built with the sole, or let me say one of the major purposes. Can it be possible that they can maximize room 1 without worrying about room 2? Of course, it will always be a challenge, but what's happening now is developers are being told the I/O system and SSD are so fast, they will back up the RAM. By the time the player touches that door to room 2, the information will be in RAM. And therefore, you open the door and you can see what's in room 2. This is showing you the power of an SSD, the power of the I/O system. As long as you can feed the RAM with information fast enough, it allows the RAM to breathe. It no longer needs to store room 1 and 2 in RAM. It can focus on room 1. This means higher quality textures in room 1, higher quality assets in room 1. This has a direct impact on what you see on screen. That is why don't let anyone cheat you that the SSD and I/O system does not impact visuals. It does. Ask any competent developer and they will tell you it does. Now, Sony focused more on its connection, I/O system and SSD. This means in the future, we may start to see some games on PS5 that truly shock us because the I/O system is fast enough, the RAM is breathing, meaning that a game, let's say Naughty Dog makes, can focus on a room so incredibly detailed. And you're thinking, how did they manage to fit this kind of quality for this room? And yet, when I open the next room, it's also incredibly detailed. It is that SSD RAM I/O system working to great effect. So please, guys, don't say the SSD and I/O system have no impact on graphics. It does.
Preach! OT, the teacher. I can honestly, OT1 Kenobi, you are the teacher, my dude. That is awesome. Honestly, like, just every time this is the second time I've watched through this video, and it's even more impressive the second time how you broke it down. And I just want to ask you, for layman's sake, you know, could you summarize that with regards to the room 1 and room 2 again for us, or you don't have to summarize it again. We've heard what you said, but just embellish it for us.
So the thing is, the sometimes the reason, let's say Final Fantasy VII on PS4, the reason the textures were so blurry is simply because these guys knew I can't get that information in time. And in fact, they made a compromise and just said, fuck it, let's just use the low res textures and put more things in RAM than we need to because of the slowness of the hard drive. And this is also an issue, especially with Unreal Engine for some reason. I've noticed Unreal Engine suffers more from streaming issues than something like Decima. That's why Days Gone had more pop-in, let's say, than you're going to see in Horizon or something like Death Stranding. So sometimes your machine is capable of better graphics than you are seeing. But the only issue it's not doing that is because the information it was being given was considering a room you're not even in. So the textures are halved, the assets are halved. And you know, because I work with Unreal Engine and 3D Max, people don't realize that if you're going to consider every other room and every other possibility, that means you just have to compromise on those textures. So your GPU can do it better. But unfortunately, if I render a low-res texture on the best PC in the world, it'll still look low-res. So all I was trying to point is sometimes they need to look at the genius of what Maxani was trying to do. Maxani was trying to say, yes, the Series X has a better GPU. I agree. But If we were to consider it a 100-meter race, Mark Sani was saying, I will be able to be more consistent through that race and may end up coming out number one. The Series X may rise very quickly, but may not be able to maintain that speed the whole way through. There are benefits to how I have made my system that gives it. That's why you're going to find PS5 is winning in some cases, or let's say the first-party games that Naughty Dog will do will be so immensely beautiful, and you're wondering, why have I not yet seen it on Series X? Yet Series X has a better GPU. It is simply because of the I/O system gives Sony a massive advantage that we haven't yet truly seen other than in Ratchet.
Yeah.
But Ratchet has given us a glimpse, and you notice we have not seen anything close to Ratchet on Series X yet.
Yes.
And I believe this is going to be a major advantage going forward.
I know Maya had a lot to that he wanted to touch on regarding what you said, OT.
I mean, just off the top of my head, I can list a bunch of reasons that a bunch of quality of life things that probably everyone's experienced. That's a result of low storage. Like, if you ever run up to an NPC that had animations and dialogue, and you walk up to them, you hit the button, and then they just kind of stare at you for a moment.
Yeah.
And then they start speaking, and they're animated and stuff. Yeah, that's because they didn't load it ahead of time, because they didn't have space in the RAM, because so much stuff is loaded around them. And then they realize, oh crap, the player's there, okay, we have to grab that from storage. And they've made that compromise because they know something like that is easier, it's quicker to grab from storage when they need it. It's not something that you can look at from far away. So then they pull that in when you need them. Or if you're, I don't know if anyone's played a game with like a bestiary and you've got, a list of monsters and you're scrolling through them, and if you're scrolling relatively fast, it shows you the data, and then it shows you a model of the monster that you're supposed to be looking at. And it takes 5 seconds before that monster actually pops in there. It's because they're not loading that entire bestiary in RAM. They can't. It's too big, so they're just waiting until the player's looking at the thing, and then they load it in. Equipment.
To give one example, Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat on Mega Drive. When you put that cartridge back in the 90s, Mortal Kombat, let's say 2, 3, Shang Tsung could change into anybody because everything was already on RAM. Consider the cartridge as RAM. But when you go to PS4, Shang Tsung cannot change into anybody because they cannot access that information. That information has to be loaded immediately. So what they do is they'll say Shang Tsung can change into maybe 2 or 3. I don't know how many guys Shang Tsung can change into on PS4, but it will be much less because whatever you need or whichever character you need him to change into has to be stored in RAM. But you see, Mega Drive didn't have that issue. So there was, think of the PS5 trying to get back to Mega Drive. Now it's saying I can actually store every character because I can access that information quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It also includes things like equipment. You ever been in like an equipment screen? You're trying to scroll through, you want to see what all these different armor combinations, you want to make changes to it. And so you pick an armor and then you've got to wait for a little moment. Oh, it popped in. Now I can see what that looks like. Like, that's just so many of these little quality of life things. But also these little quality of life things are just random examples of things. That's still not even the most interesting thing. It's just, all these little benefits. Have you ever been in a game and you look over across this, big mountain cliff face, and you can see the same little texture multiplied like this giant grid all across the thing, and it takes you right out because you can clearly see just this giant grid of this same texture multiplied so many times. Well, that's even, it doesn't matter how powerful your GPU, how many polys it can crunch, the lighting effects that it can do have nothing to do with the size of the textures that can be held in RAM. And the reason you see so much duplication there, even if you have a lot of RAM, is because if you've got a hard drive, it takes so long to pull in those to pull in stuff around you. Say you've got something that's a minute away, and it's a big thing that the player at any time could just decide head in that direction within a minute, experience that thing. If it takes a minute to load, well, they need that in RAM. Even if the player might not go see that, something like 80% of the RAM on the PS4 was occupied by data that the player might not even decide and go see, but it's got to be there in case they did.
Yeah, what you mentioned, OT, about the rooms really kind of helps me to visualize, and I use Ratchet as a specific visualization in terms of rooms, because you've got 5 big rooms in very close succession in an approximately 10-second window in Ratchet and Clank, when you're teleporting through the 5 different rifts from one world to another in close succession in part of that quick time event that takes place not far from the beginning of the game. Now, when I break that down, listening to your video, what that basically means is on prior consoles and on other consoles right now, they would probably have to put those worlds into the RAM in order for them to load quick enough to the GPU, because the SSD won't be able to bring in, or the hard drive won't be able to load in those 5 worlds right on the spot in close between a 2 to 3 second window at most, right? That being the case, there isn't enough memory of RAM to hold all of those 5 worlds in the current fidelity that we see displayed with all the assets and the high quality textures and stuff. So what that would have to do is lower the quality of the textures, the memory that each room takes up, in order to fit those 5 worlds into RAM, if, hypothetically speaking, they were trying to get Ratchet to, say, work on a PS4. Or maybe even just a last generation SSD, you know, like maybe Xbox has. Maybe they could only fit 1 world in the RAM, and they could maybe load in the 3rd world whilst you're in the 1st and 2nd world from the SSD into the RAM slowly, but partially. I don't know how they would do it, but in other words, there isn't enough RAM to have done what Ratchet and Clank did in 5 worlds and high quality, right? So they would have had to sacrifice the quality in order to get those 5 worlds onto the RAM. But with PS5, the RAM isn't needed for that, because those 5 worlds were loaded one after the other directly from the SSD into the RAM, and then to the GPU when you go through that portal, literally in almost an instant, because the SSD is therefore acting as RAM, and that's literally a realization of what Sony was saying, that they can get the SSD to work as RAM. And I actually saw a post where the SSD speeds that the PS5 has in its lower area of operation, between 5 to 7 gigabytes per second, it could run at maybe 20 if fully optimized. That's the same kind of speed that DDR2 RAM was running at, between 5 and 7 gigabytes per second. So we really are going into RAM territory with the SSD of the PS5, and that's why we're able to see each world that Ratchet went in was beautifully detailed, because they didn't need to sacrifice the quality of those worlds and worry about how much asset allocation they need for, and memory allocation they need for the next world in the RAM. Is that basic? Sorry, I'm not very good at articulating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah, you know, the one other thing is, the other advantage is, what this I/O system does is speed. The speed of accessing that information. Games like Forspoken, to me, seem like they technically cannot be done on the last generation because of the speed of traversal. If you notice, when Sony did a demo of Spider-Man, they showed Spider-Man moving. They were trying to show Spider-Man moving at incredible speed. Before the PS5 came out, they showed a demo of Spider-Man moving through the town of New York at incredible speed. The PS4, when they tried to do it on PS4, you'd see it stop and wait for the RAM to come, then stop, wait for the RAM to load. Sorry. So I don't know if you guys ever saw that demo. Did you guys see
I
it?
did, yeah. And
Yeah.
the fast version, they actually replaced Spider-Man with just a jet. They're like, just watch the jet move through this city as fast as a jet would. Just
Yeah.
to exaggerate the idea.
Exactly. So the I/O system allowed the PS5 to render it at good quality and high speed. If you switched the PS5's I/O system and then said render the same scene with a PS4 hard drive, PS5 would have had the same problem despite having a better GPU. So what they would have done is they would have said, okay, let's just try, instead of what PS5 is doing of bringing in that information as he's moving, that means that information would have to be crammed into RAM. So therefore, again, lower textures, lower fidelity. And that's what people don't understand, is memory does affect visuals. But because that narrative goes against Xbox being the most superior console in the world, they want to negate it and simplify it to just the loading screen, which is naive.
Yeah. No, 100%. You guys explain it far better than me. Go on, Leviathan.
Yeah, so I can add a little bit more context because I'm more hardware oriented, so like I can explain. So there's dueling sides to storage. There's speed and size. And if you want to go faster with speed, you trade off on the size of your storage capacity, right? Yeah. And if you go for a larger size, your trade-off is you have to go with a much slower speed. And so if we go back in history, back to the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era, game developers prioritize speed with game cartridges, right? Because it would be near instantaneous that you could load stuff from the game cartridges. But the trade-off was size. Games of that era were heavily constrained. NES was super constrained by file size limits. So then what ended up happening is we get to Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1, and if people from that era know what I'm talking about.
It was extreme during that era.
Yeah. The size, so there's the two different formats. There was cartridge, and then there was CD-ROMs. With CD-ROM, you could get 600 megabytes of storage on a single CD, and the cartridge size at the time was around like 12 and 16 megabytes.
64 megabytes, if I remember correctly. 64 megabytes versus 440, I think. But yeah, still, huge difference.
No, it's 660, and then 64 was what the Nintendo 64 got to by the end of its life cycle. At the beginning, it was 12 for the launch games. So what that meant is there's this trade-off between size and speed, right? The Nintendo 64 had much faster loading capability, but the size was constraining the game so heavily.
Right.
Like, Square has publicly come out and said that a big component of why they went with PlayStation for Final Fantasy VII was because of how tiny the size of the cartridge was.
Yeah.
That it limited what they were capable of doing visually with the game. So it just was not viable.
They wouldn't have been able to have the size of the world that they had with Final Fantasy VII on N64.
That game was ambitious. Ambitious is crazy. You could. It was huge, wasn't it? Land, sea, sky. That makes sense. I'm seeing a guy. I'm seeing a guy, the truth teller, saying what was done in Ratchet could be done on a PS3. I think that's a gross simplification.
I do want to specifically address that because there was a big, I can't remember which dev it was, said that what they did on Ratchet and Clank could be done on the PS3, and the rest. Technically speaking, they could have those effects happen on the PS3, but Wooly already went over the drawbacks compared to what's on the PS5.
OT did in his video. I just re-echoed it.
Exactly. So you could have Ratchet and Clank, jump through 5 portals in a row to just completely different worlds. But on the PlayStation 5, each of those worlds that you're in, that world can fill your RAM. And then you move through the portal, you dump your RAM, fill it with fresh new data. So you've got, all of the RAM on your console is dedicated to each of those worlds and then dumped and refreshed as you move to the next world. What you would have to do on a PlayStation 3 is have all of those worlds in your RAM at the same time, dividing the amount of RAM you can dedicate to each world by 5. That's the difference. Yes, the effects could be done, but there are much harsher drawbacks to doing so.
Yeah. Facts, 100%. I just want to ask a question. This might sound pretty dumb, but just remember, I ain't the expert here. You guys are a lot more savvy with this stuff than I am. Does that basically mean that a PS5, well, unlike say a PS3, say both had right? Let me rephrase this. A PS5 can fill it's 16 gigabytes of RAM dedicated to one environment only, what's on screen in front of you, right? But can it do more than that as well, because the SSD also acts as a secondary RAM, so to speak, so it continues to display on screen more than 16 gigabytes of assets? Does that make sense? Or is it just 16 gigabytes on screen that we see in terms of assets?
So constrained to the 16 gigabytes because it's more technically complicated, but it's the difference in like architectural design of an SSD versus RAM itself. Is what would happen is there'd be no easy way to display all that data and render it because of how bandwidth constrained it'd get. So it'd have to go to RAM. So like it'd have to run through the 16 gigabytes.
So the way that I would explain that is your GPU needs to have the data available to it to render it, which means, and that rendering has to happen every frame.
And it's exclusive to the RAM. The SSD can't do that directly.
The SSD is not fast enough to supply.
Sorry, bro, you just cut out.
Technically, you could have something like a few megabytes provided from the SSD every frame, but it would just be so little data that it would not make a big difference.
Right, I hear
you. Might as well just use the RAM.
But where the PS5 is displaying, 16 gigs of information within when you open a door and walk in a room, if it was running on something slower and that had to be divided for the next room, for example, and for other assets that are off screen, you would only be seeing probably 5 gigabytes or 6 gigabytes of data on screen. So that would directly impact the visuals and the quality and the amount of assets on screen in front of you. So again, backing up OT's point and harmonizing with your point, SSD doesn't make a GPU more powerful, but what the PS5 is doing is it's giving the GPU access to a lot more information that isn't being held away from it at that given time, because it's saving that for the next room, so to speak.
I just wanted to point out one more thing, which I think Leviathan, because I'm not so good at this, but it wasn't. Sony was not only satisfied to make sure the speed at which the RAM could get information was very fast, but he was also very interested in how to dump that information so that the RAM can be filled in with more information. If it wouldn't have made sense if you fill the RAM and it takes forever to dump. That means it's not efficient. And these are just some small touches that Sony was doing that I feel, unfortunately, because of time, we have not yet fully understood. But I believe the guy who made this game, which guys really hated at the beginning, but Wooly loves it, This it's a shooting game. Sony had it for PS4 at the beginning. What do you call that game?
Killzone?
The one with vampires or something. These guys who
Vampire, is it that Masquerade? You talking about the new one?
no, on PS4 it launched.
Oh, it's on
and
PS4, right?
The Order 1886.
The Order,
Okay.
yes. That the developer who made that game before they went over to Facebook or whatever said, in time, people will understand the genius of what Maxadi has done. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that we will see a game we will not understand how it's being done on the PS5, and it is simply down. The reason developers were so excited about the PS5 is it changed them from worrying about things that you're not going to see. And I still think the Xbox does a good job. I'm not trying to say the Xbox does a bad job, but it is not revolutionary in how fast. The PS5's is double. It just needs to be coded for, and we have not yet seen it being truly coded for outside of Ratchet. So we'll see in time. But I believe the best looking games are going to be on PS5 because of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
So we can all agree unanimously that it's not just game design that the SSD architecture can change through priority of assets fundamentally being changed. It changes what the developers can choose to save for RAM and use the RAM for compared to what they used to use the RAM for, and that's crazy, right? That's exciting, but it also fundamentally changes the visuals of a game and the what we can potentially and will potentially be seeing displayed on the screen in a game, which is incredible. I'm very excited for Spider-Man 2 as a for example, because apparently your swing speed is 180% faster, so that's crazy.
Wow.
I do have a couple more points on this topic.
Go for it.
I do want to mention how it doesn't only affect the amount of detail, the quality of textures that you can put in the world, but it also affects how developers can build their worlds. Right now, limited by hard drives, a lot of things that developers do are they put in these tunnels that act as effectively loading screens without being a loading screen, or they'll put stuff in the way sort of to obscure big areas in sort of a head that they're not ready to load in yet. What this SSD tech is it changes how developers can look at building the worlds. They can be more free with not putting these tunnels in to act as loading screens. They can open up the horizons more so you can see more. It's a really big deal. Another thing is
revolutionary, isn't it?
Yeah, and another thing that I want to touch on with specifically that Unreal 5 has already talked about it, but I absolutely believe other engines will implement very similar tech, is effectively infinite detail limited by the amount of storage space on your drive. Because what you can do is modularly change how much data is in RAM for a specific model. So what you do right now, there's this process or technique called level of detail. So you would have multiple different models for a single object that appears in game. And as you get closer to it, that model is swapped out with a different model that's, the same thing, but a higher detailed version of it. Unreal 5 is getting rid of that. What Unreal 5 allows you to do is just drop in the model. There's also something very similar with with textures called bitmaps. And they're basically a single texture will have a bunch of different versions of that texture, of different qualities that get swapped out based on this sort of like polling. And it's extra time and energy that your GPU has to spend trying to figure out which version of which texture it might have. And you'll have to have all of them in your memory all at the same time. What Unreal does is it just dynamically takes an object. The developers have to upload this object one time. High quality. You can have billions of triangles on this thing. Like insane texture detail. And then what you do is, what the engine's capable of is, depending on how far you are away from it, it'll just bring some detail into RAM. And as you get closer to it, it dynamically is adding more and more and more detail to that thing. So yeah, you're still limited to 16 gigabytes in RAM, but the detail visible on that object is very different away if it's across the room compared to if your camera's right up against the thing and you're trying to pixel peep. It can hold up insanely well. And Unreal Engine not only reduces the amount of data required for that sort of thing by not requiring you to have multiple versions of that object with different levels of detail, but it also means that the developers don't have to spend time making these lower detail copies. In fact, it's something right now. There are entire jobs, people whose jobs, literally, they're graphics artists, and what their jobs are is replicating work from other people in lower quality to get it into the game.
It sounds a chore.
It is.
In layman's terms, my dude, if I could break this down so I can understand it a bit better. What we used to is textures being like pictures, right? Pictures in game, pictures on a screen in game, and far away pictures are the bigger a horizon or a vista, the more objects you can see. The more objects you can see, the more memory those objects are taking up altogether.
Exactly.
Unless you lower the quality. Now, so what they do is they have these static pictures, and the closer you go up to a texture, right, that picture's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like getting a low res it's like getting a 1080p picture. A small 1080p picture, and then blowing it up like a canvas, and it's gonna look shoddy. So what they then do is to say, well, because you're closer and that's taking up the majority of the screen, we can increase the memory of that picture to make it look better. But that takes work and artistry, because what you're then doing is you're having duplicates. You're having 1, 2, 3, 4 versions of the same texture or picture. You can literally swap the word texture with picture, and it means the same thing, right? And and that's how they've done it. But this fundamentally removes all of that work, and this fundamentally changes the whole thing with Nanite, which means that more effort and time can be put to, rather than making copies of low to relatively high-res pictures, still not perfecting detail. You can go up to a 2K texture, like in Days Gone, go up to a tree, zoom right in, and it looks shit. Well, of course it will. You're zooming in on the scope, and it's still a picture at the end of the day, and a static picture. And God forbid the devs go to work to create 4K, 8K versions for you, and that's like 10 pictures for just one texture. It just wouldn't work. So what they've done is they've made 2 or 3 copies up, and this is the conventional way of doing it. But now Nanite gets rid of all of that, and so those devs no longer need to do that boring ass chore, and they can focus on far more important things. But how does Nanite differ from textures? Like how is what we see no longer a static picture being blown up on the screen and being replaced, or is it AI approximation, which I don't think it is? What is it? It's not DLSS on steroids, is it? So
No, it's not. I don't actually know the details of how they do it, but it has more to do with they're taking that original image, and the way it's laid out in storage is their engine presents it in a way in storage where, say a model with all of its triangles and all of its textures is something like, let's say crazy like 1 gigabyte. It's just huge. But you don't have, it's something far off. You don't have a gigabyte to store this thing. So it's able to grab 10 megabytes of that, but use those 10 megabytes to create a low quality version of that object in real time without having to have a developer craft that lower level.
Hand draw it, so to speak.
Yeah. So, and then as they move towards it, now it's 20 megabytes. Now it's 80 megabytes. Now it's, if you're right next to it and it's taken up your whole screen, maybe you're probably looking at half of it. Maybe it's, 600 megabytes or something like that. So it just is able to dynamically increase how much of that data of that object exists in your RAM. I have no idea how it.
I seem to remember it's something that Insomniac have also tried using with Ratchet and Clank and also Miles Morales. That I think Ratchet and Clank, actually, I don't know if Miles Morales uses it, but they use a triangle-based algorithm, like an algorithm that basically, I don't know if Leviathan can word this better or use, but basically they keep the pixels on screen a constant because they're a constant, and what they do is the memory allocation doesn't change. It's hard to explain. The textures don't necessarily change, but what's allowed through to the memory allocation remains a constant. So I don't know how to dude. I'm not tech savvy enough for this lingo, but I'm picturing it in my head how they do it. But it's different. It's different to textures, right? It is different to the conventional method of having pictures and blowing them up and shrinking them and
Wooly, let me say that I'm not sure how they do it, to be honest, but the textures might not be the biggest issue they have. The biggest issue with Nanite, or let me say advantage, is the geometry more than the textures.
Yeah.
The geometry, because textures, even if they go and do work and say, okay, we'll load in these textures.
That's it. They're not textures, OT. They're triangles. That's it, isn't it?
That's geometry. Yeah. Triangles is geometry.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah. But what I'll say is, Unreal Engine 5 is going to be tremendous for indies, for indie studios. It's going to make their work much higher quality than they previously were able to get. But when it comes to people like Kojima, when it comes to, or let me just say, the guy, let's say Gorilla, they will not abandon what they have because there are advantages to their engine. The advantage of, let's say, having an LOD system, it's lighter on RAM. If you look at the requirements for Unreal Engine 5, you notice they're quite heavy. The beauty of these next-gen machines is they are beasts. So they're allowing indie developers to stress the machine more to get good quality, but not necessarily in the most efficient way. So the traditional method may seem primitive, but it is less, it is, let me say, easier on the system. And what does that allow you to do? You're also now allowed to bump up the resolution. You're allowed to bump up other things. So you find Unreal Engine is saying, hey, we can do all of these things for you, but hey, we are advising you to be 1080p or 1440p. But if you look at Horizon Forbidden West, it's already at 4K with so many features, and you hardly notice the LOD switching. Of course, it could be better, but I would rather, I'm saying, let me not say I would rather, I see the benefit of sacrificing some of what Unreal is doing, which is beautiful, but is heavy, and then looking at what Decima is doing, where they're still going on traditional systems, but that allows the PS5 to really ramp it up, and you can even get easily a 60 frame per second version of a game just by using some of these traditional methods.
Yeah, in other words, Unreal Engine is like the full shebang, but what other devs are doing is to save the cost on CPU and etc. for all these complex algorithms.
Yes.
They kind of hybrid. They pick and choose and take a bit of that and take a bit of that, whilst keeping traditional methods also. Yeah, I hear you. Leviathan, do you have anything to add to this, or HD Gamer, or?
I think Leviathan's, he's jumped off. I think he had to go teach some classes or something, he said in the chat. But I could probably give a bit of a higher level. Like, I think Maya gave some pretty in-depth sort of stuff there, and Odie's some good points too, and maybe bring it back. I really liked, from the start and summing it up, that Odie's analogy of the rooms, and I just wanted to sort of touch on that again, because I don't think we've the impact there sort of can't be overstated. And our examples we're using is like one or two rooms, like you can load instead of having 3 rooms loaded in RAM, you can have 1 room. But when you consider it, it can be far more than just 3 rooms in RAM, and like it could be, there could be 16 other rooms that you don't need to have loaded in RAM that you can focus. So I think the benefits there are much greater. And I commented on Odie's picture because I said I'd been struggling to try and explain it in a simple way. And I think
that's Odie's mastercraft. He's a master at articulation.
But if I could throw in one, I tried, and it's a harder analogy, but when I consider it, if you consider sort of as a volume, because that's really what these rooms are, sort of volumes or areas around the player where objects are located. So if you consider a volume around the player, or a sphere, say a sphere around a player, so everything within the volume of that sphere has to be is contained in memory, and that's all the objects that the player may, as May said, may interact with, may see, or play or use. So the larger the volume of the sphere, the larger the number of objects you need to have in memory. So, and that ties into the throughput. So if you've got, the smaller the volume of the sphere, the smaller the number of objects, and you can spend more memory on each of those objects, like Odie's example of the rooms. So what's interesting is if you consider, say, the radius of this sphere is inversely proportional to the I/O throughput. So that means you double your I/O throughput, you halve the radius of that sphere. And what's interesting about that is if you halve the radius, so if you double your I/O throughput, you'll decrease the volume of that sphere by a factor of 8, not just 2. So you have a factor of 8 times less things you need to have stored in memory. So you could potentially spend that extra memory like by a factor of 8 on those objects. It's not just 2 or 3, because there's a lot of, in an open world like GTA or something like that, where you can interact with so many different things. You can go left, right, up, down. Like the amount of objects you actually have to store in RAM is much greater than you'd think. So, and as you said, I think Sony said it as well. It's all about increasing the active RAM, like the RAM that's actively on screen, and reducing the idle RAM, which is the RAM that's just sitting there in case it's needed. I think we sort of touched on a lot of the benefits. I think Maya did a great job there with the LOD and MIPMAP management. Save a lot of time on producing that, so you don't have the same assets repeated. And I mean, we've heard that as well, that an SSD, because of there's the seek time aspect.
Hard drives have seek time,
the hard drives take a lot longer to find the data on the disk, so the developers generally duplicate assets a great deal. So I don't know if we've touched on that, but the game sizes may not increase as much as we suspect this gen from that cost saving in reducing duplication. You've got less LODs. You don't have to make multiple LODs. You don't have to save multiple bitmaps. And I guess touching on what you said with Unreal Engine is that they may not even need like normal maps because they can get such a high level of geometrical detail. Like they gave an example on those statues. Like some of it,
That was incredible.
scratches and stuff, are textures maybe, but they have enough geometrical detail. They don't need to do normal maps. They said you still can. And I think Unreal has some issues with certain aspects, like, you know, I think vegetation, like I think they called it, I can't remember the word, conglomerate or aggregate models, where there's a lot of overlapping geometry, like leaves, transparent materials. I think skeletal structures, I think they struggle to do that with nanite, but you know, you still maybe will need your LODs and bitmaps in certain aspects, but for a lot of that, the geometry, the environmental geometry, you may not even need those normal maps. So the team don't have to spend time, as Maya said, developing these, not just developing the assets, but the systems of, you know, controlling when they come in and out. Like I think there's some devs were talking about, you know, simplifying sort of the texture caches can be simplified. You know, there's a lot of complex logic involved in that to figure out sort of what textures are needed, when they need them, when to evict them. There's some savings there with, you know, development time. It's going to make it easier for devs to create these games. And what Oti said there with indies, you know, that's one of the things I'm most excited about with these tools. We saw with, you know, Kenna. Kana, I can never pronounce it properly. That
Kana.
Kana. What a small team was able to do, like what they could output. And that gets me excited for what other smaller teams can sort of produce, and you know, get happening here.
You know, one of the things I'm interested in is I don't know if you guys remember. I think it was during the PS3 era when GTA was being made. Was it GTA 4? Anyway, I can't remember. Rockstar, they're called Rockstar? Yeah, Rockstar complained about the PS3. And they were saying that the issues with how Sony did the RAM and such things made it difficult for them to make GTA on PS3. And that's just showing you some of how important RAM can be on an open world game. But now, when I look at how far Sony has come, I would think the most advanced version of a GTA could be a PS5 exclusive. Of course, they'll never do it. But the fact that you can load in twice as fast as the Xbox, that means you can load in twice as fast complex animations, like you're passing a character and they're doing very complex things. These things take too much space in RAM. So that's why when you're walking in GTA, you'll see them do things and it sounds good, blah, blah, blah. But if you really look at them, the animations are stiff because animations take a lot of space in RAM. So imagine if you could stream it in and dump it out and stream it in and dump it out very fast. It means you could have an incredible GTA, but they won't do it because they need it to work on Series X. They need it to work on PCs that don't have a fast I/O system or whatever. But hypothetically, if Rockstar ever made a PS5 exclusive, it would be incredible.
Yeah.
Just hearing your people, you know, just seeing your knowledge from all of you guys and like hearing you talk really makes me want to touch upon this subject. But unfortunately, I'm really not that educated on that field, which is why I was quiet the whole time. Like, hi, my name is Will. I'm still there. I haven't fallen asleep.
You're a wiser man than me, Wilhelm, because I was like trying to articulate like how I'm picturing it, what you guys are saying, but struggling miserably. No, but yeah, facts. It's incredible, like what you guys are discussing. I wanted to ask you guys quickly before we just touch on the other subjects, so I'm not accused of clickbait. What your thoughts are on bottlenecks? Why is there a potential bottleneck with this? Is there a potential bottleneck? Now, HD Gamer, you touched on the fact that it won't necessarily actually all these individual assets that could be crafted and these high quality textures and stuff that could be pushed through at incredible speeds would result in huge game file sizes. But there is something countering that, isn't there, with SSD IO, and that's the removal of duplicates. But do you want to touch on that and dive deeper on that?
Yeah, look, I was mainly this is a discussion actually I had with Leviathan on Twitter. So I'd read all Maya's takes on this, and I'd been really excited, and I think Leviathan sort of brought me down to earth a little bit and said,
he does that.
Despite all the savings we just mentioned, so that the game file sizes are going to shrink relatively, but also increase because you have 8K textures and just more dense geometry. But I think it'll be offset by those reduction in the duplicates, and as we just sort of said, those less need to LOD models and as many MIP maps possibly or normal maps. But I think Leviathan's point was mainly about that game file size. Like, there is sort of a limit to how many of these games we can fit on the solid state storage. Like, even with those cost savings, if games get up to 100, 150 gigabytes, even 200 gigabytes, like there's the limit of the Blu-rays, and that's something he mentioned. And I kind of disagree, because I think Sony has released two games on multiple discs before. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is on 2 discs. It's got a data disc and a game disc. But he was mainly sort of just saying that it's the size of these game files. So for you to have enough unique assets or textures to sort of have that visual quality we're talking about, where every room has a different set of assets, really high quality textures and assets. If you're trying to achieve that and really maximize the potential of this system, where every scene has individual distinct assets or textures, then the game file size is going to keep increasing, and that may be the bottleneck, that it's the actual game file size on your disk that may prevent you reaching this. But I don't know if Maya's got anything to add to that or to counter that. I hope he does, because I want Leviathan to be proven wrong there.
So I mean, yeah, it's definitely true that there is that will become a bottleneck here pretty soon, and we've already talked to death, I feel, several of the mitigation factors for that. So like an 80 gigabyte game on PS5 is going to have a very different amount of detail than an 80 gigabyte game on PS4. But also something that we saw on, particularly I think it was evident on the PS3 generation, is what was the internal hard drive size of like launch era PS3s? Wasn't it like 80 gigs or something like that?
I think.
Or maybe 40 or something. It was like 40 or 80. I think you could buy either, something like that. But by the end, by the time the PS4 came out, 500 gigabyte and like 1 terabyte. I don't know if 1 terabyte. For sure, 500 gigabytes were available. I kind of expect to see a similar thing with the PS5. Third-party storage expansion options are going to come out, and those are, because they are third-party, unlike on the Xbox, they're just going to get cheaper and cheaper and bigger. And I think PS5s with larger and larger internal SSDs are going to get released. I would not be surprised to see by the end of the PS5 generation, if there's a game with 300 plus gigabytes. I mean, it'll be huge, but I think the system and the storage sizes will increase over the next several years to accommodate that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah.
I also think a bottleneck is dev time, to be honest, because unless they increase the price of video games, which I would be willing to pay, I think this argument that these games come in aren't worth, that no game should cost $70, or even worse, £70, or even worse for HD Gamer in Australian dollars, 120. or 130, however much it is. Say that when you pick up Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine and all these future games coming out. I'm just going to disagree. I think these games are worth the money. Regardless, they would have to charge more if they were if devs were going to handcraft a huge variety of assets and because if the more assets you stream in a given space of time, the higher the bandwidth a game's utilizing, the more work on a dev's part, unless they're all just copies of each other.
I have a few things to say to that. It's I follow Star Citizen quite a lot. I watch a lot of their panels. I've spent, I care not say how much money on that game, but I do follow it quite closely, and I watch a lot of the discussions between their devs, including their artists, as well as I've several other artist panels, and typically what happens in game development is the artists are not spending more and more time. I mean, compared to a long time ago, yes, they're spending a lot more time, but recently it's not a lot of time making the assets with more and more detail. Typically, the first iterations of assets created by artists are way more detailed than the engine and the platform can handle. So they create it with full detail first, and then they pare it down. They make it more efficient so that it can get into the system. What this means is there's just less of that step. It's not like there's going to be a lot more time spent improving the quality of these assets. It's more about less time paring it down to fit, if that makes any sense. But another thing that can be done, that this becomes more of an issue as sort of speaking less on specific models that you want really high detail and more about when you're building massive worlds. These worlds, if you're thinking about modeling every leaf on every tree, that's just an incredible amount of time that nobody is doing anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of these games are heavily the art design process for the worlds are heavily artist-driven AI processes. Procedural generation, not really AI, it's different, but procedural generation is being used more and more to greater and greater effect over time to help develop these things, and tools are being developed to make the artist's hand in the artist's hand in the generation of these worlds more and more useful. The artist can be more flexible with the tools to create what they imagine without having to spend more time detailing every little piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think some party software sort of tools or toolkits can help with that too? So
100%.
Scan libraries where the artists don't have to actually create these themselves as a library of assets available that they can purchase.
100%. I mean,
one for the tree. I can't remember what that one's called. Like these.
Star Citizen specifically discusses this quite a bit because they've got all of these different worlds and they're not games like Elite Dangerous and No Man's Sky where everything is purely procedurally generated. A lot of what Star Citizen has spent the last 8 years on, like this game is famous for how long it's taking. Is they're building these tools, they're building the foundations, they're building the asset sets from which they can use to craft more quickly craft. So the pace of their development of adding content is accelerating over time. because the software and the tools are improving over time.
Cool.
It's crazy. Guys, I'm
one
aware of
more
the time. Go on, HD.
So just to tie up that, I just a few interesting possibilities that I found with sort of the game design, not just the visuals. I mean, I think we touched on that briefly, but OT touched on it with Forspoken. So, rapid traversal games like your Wipeout, your flight games where you can get very close to the geometry. I think another one was games with rapid scale changes. So very small to the very large rapidly would really benefit sort of streaming architectures. And as I said, Wooly, with the scope, you can zoom down a scope on a rifle, and you're getting that low quality LOD because the system hasn't had time to load it in with the fast IO, the fast SSD. You could be loading in the highest level LOD, or with nanite, whatever level of detail it needs to fill. One interesting thing I found, someone said, I think a developer, was about time manipulation in games, and he said that the in addition to sort of faster loading, saving will also be significantly faster. So you don't have these sort of auto saves or manual saves, and then games like Prince of Persia or Blinks or Braid, where you could sort of be saving some of the things that are happening on screen in the memory and then rewinding it. So say an explosion that's tore through a building, sending, bits and pieces of it everywhere, you being able to rewind that because the system saves that specific thing back into the SSD. I think there's a lot of things there.
It's all multiplicative, isn't it? It all has a multiplicative impact, And I was also thinking, with devs being able to focus purely on geometry, like with these statues, for example, that the artistry and the experimentation, no longer are you going to have devs assigned solely to recreating poorer quality versions of another artist's work. Those devs can be given free creative reign to craft their own assets out of with these geometry tools that, say, Nanite presents. And so, like, in my opinion, there's a multiplicative impact with all the potential bottlenecks there are, with like memory going up and a dev time going up. There's also more devs freed up because of the advances this technology is bringing to kind of almost offset that in a way. So and that would even add to even more the ambition behind these projects. And touching on what you just said, HD Gamer, about these textures, even if a game still utilizes the norm way of like rasterization and stuff with textures instead of solely relying on geometry with Nanite, and zooming in and seeing these insane high quality textures taking up like 600 to 800 megabytes, maybe even. See, that wouldn't be possible on a console with with a slow SSD or maybe a hard drive, for example, because, like you said, it wouldn't be able to load those textures quick enough. If you zoomed in with a scope, it would be blurry for like 4 or 5 seconds or 6 seconds. Whereas so even if they rely on these old methods, the SSD still boosts and plays a part in even these mundane methods still benefit as well. So it's crazy. Go on.
It is, and like there's a greater emphasis on sort of streaming, as we see in these new engines, and it'll benefit that sort of those traditional methods too of loading in your LODs or mipmaps faster, but also allow sort of new ways to create games like Nanite's sort of doing. So
imagine
there's
being
that
a sniper.
There, yeah.
Imagine being a sniper, and we've seen in games where you zoom through binoculars and it's ugly because nothing really has changed much in the quality of what you're seeing, because first of all, it's built for a PS4, and the PS4 isn't fast enough to have I don't know, for the devs to have curated a scope exclusive kind of display of assets. Whereas now with SSD tech, you could be a sniper overlooking a huge vista. You could get out a 32 times scope with with a bullet velocity of 8,000 meters per second, like a plasma rifle or some shit. Scope through it, and you'd be looking at gorgeous 4K resolution textures. Everything would be incredible on screen, because all of that part of the open world that you can go to, the devs can have the SSD push through the scope of that specific area. I imagine that would be possible with SSD tech. So that's a whole new level of immersion, right?
Yeah.
And even that, hitting them, like you could have a quick teleport animation and you're behind that character you've just zoomed across the map and zoomed in on. Like, it's just,
and the RAM could keep him there. The RAM could keep him there, because no longer is the RAM struggling to loading in like just around the corner of where you are. That RAM's focused on making sure that enemy that you killed 3,000 meters away stays there until you reach him.
Yeah.
Bro, it's crazy. Game design, bro. I have so much respect for game devs, and this podcast has so deepened my appreciation for that. And you guys, this podcast is so lit. OT messaged me just before on WhatsApp going, Wooly, this podcast tonight is incredible. I'm learning so much, and so thank you, Maya and HD Gamer, in that regard.
Yeah, no problem.
That's insane. I just wanted to, I'm gutted Lev had to go, because this is his kind of thing. He's a massive Halo fan. But just so that I'm not touching on clickbait, I don't know if you guys have a spare 15 minutes remaining just to touch on.
I have time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you your guys' thoughts on Halo and Ghost Runner. We'll get Ghost Runner out the way. What's going on with the Xbox Series X? Is it just the tools, or is it more behind it? Why is the Xbox Series X the 40 to 50% delta, touted delta that it would have over the PS5 by paid influencers, right? Why is it struggling to run at the same resolution with ray tracing a game at even 50 frames per second? What's going on here?
So is HD Gamer? I have my take, but maybe I'll let HD Gamer go first on this one.
I don't have a lot to add technically from that, because that's what I was interested to sort of hear what Lev and
me too.
Okay.
To say. I'm not really sure of anything in the hardware that would really prevent it from doing that. And I think it's probably down to the software. Like, there's so many different ways they can optimize the software or code these games.
Mm-hmm.
It could be they're just not taking advantage.
There are people saying
coded.
Yeah, there are people saying that it was a port direct from PC, whereas PS5 is more bespoke, like a native version. I don't know if that's true.
That means it's been tailored around the PS5 a bit more. Like, it won't be as
it could be.
I know the PS5 can do a few things with ray tracing. I think that's touched on a while ago by Red Gaming Tech. I know it can do more bounces per ray, and the Xbox apparently can throw out this, but I really couldn't tell you if the hardware has effect. I think it's purely software, and that it's been more optimized for the PS5 than the Series X. I don't think there's too much to take away from that.
For me, I feel like I believe the Series X is a very capable machine, and maybe if it was given more time, it could get to the PS5 level in this game, or even supersede it. These machines have been designed with specific strengths, so there'll be some games where Xbox is better, some games where PS5 is better. But what I want to say is the PS5 community has not been claiming 40 to 50 frames, and that is why when these kind of events happening, we reinstate it and we say, hey, remember you guys were talking that nonsense. Now what's happening? So the thing is, rather some of these, not Xbox fans, but let me say Xbots, who run around with this nonsense, they are the ones who have put the scrutiny on the Series X. And I wish they would just calm down and say, you know what? Mark Cerny had an alternative way of solving a problem that seems to be more efficient in some games, and we accept it. But they want to make an excuse for every time the Series X doesn't perform.
Facts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's a lot like I follow a lot of PC hardware, so I see NVIDIA and AMD hardware going back and forth and a lot of comparisons, and you watch some guys like Hardware and Box, they'll do a chart and they'll show this GPU versus this GPU in like 40 games, and you can see one GPU might be losing by 20% in this game, but winning by 30% in another game. Well, that is a huge delta in performance, and there's a ton of reasons that can explain that. Like the PS5, I'm not convinced that the PS5 or the Xbox Series X GPU, that I'm not convinced that either of them is faster than the other in any significant way. Probably, overall, by the end of their lifespan, if you average everything up, one of them will be a little bit faster. But Xbox Series X is a broader GPU that runs slower. And PlayStation 5 is a narrower that runs faster. And yeah, you can count the teraflops, but the teraflops never tell the full story. So it just comes down to the approach to game development of some developers, or maybe some things that they had to do for certain games to get the things looking just the way they wanted them. Some games will just lend themselves to the broader, slower approach, and some game engines will lend themselves to the narrower, faster, and that's always going to happen. And because of that, I think we're just going to keep seeing games going back and forth, wins back and forth, and I don't think either of them is particularly faster than the other. That's my opinion.
It takes me back to Hitman 3. Everybody was saying the PS5 was more performant, but it actually wasn't. Leviathan masterfully kind of brought to light the fact that because it's running at roughly 80% more pixels, 60% more pixels, I believe it was running on the Xbox Series X, and it was still running at 60 frames per second in most areas except the heavy rasterization parts, with the alpha assets, i.e. the grass and the flowers in that one area being particularly heavy. Rasterization particularly benefiting from clock speed, which is PS5's cakewalk, right? That's where PS5 takes the cake. The PS5 was actually lower in performance, less performant than the Xbox Series X, except it's just that it wasn't as heavily taxed and impacted by high rasterization areas, which is why, although it ran at a more solid 60, it was also running at a constant lower resolution, i.e. it was running at 60% less pixels, but reaching roughly 65 FPS maybe on altogether. But the Xbox Series X was managing 65, 67 FPS on average, at a much higher resolution, much more pixels, but then being tanked by the heavy rasterization areas, because that's Xbox Series X's weakness. So what this told me was, it's not as it always seems, and we can get things wrong at face value. And was this really a win for PS5? I thought so at first, at face value, but then with a little bit of education and deeper insight, you realise it's not all it claims to be. And I think the onus here is maybe with a little bit more modesty on Microsoft's part, and giving these devs a little bit more time as well, not trying to get this Tower of Power narrative kind of ham-fisted down our throats. The Xbox Series X could beat PS5 in performance almost every time, except for heavy rasterization areas and obviously heavy asset streaming areas, because of its power capabilities. However, I don't see that happening, and what we are getting in reality is what appears to be more sluggish console. The difference is that with Ghost Runner, it's the same resolution. It's complete parity in terms of specs, and so it's an even playing field and test. So when we see a huge delta in favor of PS5 running at the same, it begs the question, what's going on here? And there are theories this is a direct port from PC with less time, and PS5 having DualSense features means that they've spent more time on the PS5 version, and it's just not ready on the Xbox Series X. It's not optimized enough. That could be true. All I know is the narrative that the Xbox Series X isn't powerful enough isn't true. It can't be.
Yeah. It's a fast console, no question about it.
But it is bad. It still ultimately breaks down to real world performance and what the consumer gets. And unfortunately, we're seeing this pattern. We are seeing a pattern. And maybe it's just because it sounds cheesy, but the tools aren't ready. But I thought this whole SDK with DX12 and all that lot meant a lot easier transitions for PC games going to Xbox than PC games going to PlayStation. But
exactly,
I'm confused, bro. I don't know what to believe anymore with this.
Personally, I just think that there's definitely less bottlenecks on PS5. So sometimes you might find, like these guys have said, some games are going to lend themselves better to the PS5. But in terms of what is technically a much easier console to port, I think the PS5 has some strong advantages that really come. But what I'd also say is, like I always say, the Xbox is a very capable machine. I'm not going to downplay it, and I think one of the best visuals we're going to find is in this game that Ninja Theory is making. It's a very small, the apartment game.
Oh, they're so talented, bro. They're so talented.
Yeah, that game is gonna blow us away, because one thing, they're making that game to suit Series X's strength. Remember I was talking about the rooms.
Yeah.
They've limited.
You're old.
Yes. They've limited the size of that game. So it means that in comparison to the PS5, which would probably be able to handle a much bigger world with high fidelity assets streaming in quickly. Now, because they've limited the size, remember they're sort of bringing it back to one room. If PS5 and Series X render one room with everything in RAM, Series X wins. PS5's advantage starts to come when you start to bring in options. So I think we're going to see this back and forth throughout the generation. But what I think is, just remember, the One X was the most powerful console, but the best graphics we saw last gen, God of War, Uncharted 4, Death Stranding.
Last of Us Part 2.
Last of Us Part 2. That was with a weaker machine. Now, somehow, these guys are telling us, with the PS5 and Series X being comparable, now we're going to see the Series X show us the dust. Impossible. These guys already showed you what they could do with weaker hardware. Now what do you think they're going to do with similar consoles? They're going to blow them out of the water. I know that pisses off some Xbox guys, but the truth is that talent they had last gen has not been forgotten. So I'm expecting to see some games just outstanding based on the fact that God of War beat anything I saw on the One X.
It's crazy.
I have an... Sorry?
Oh, you go ahead, Maya. I'll go.
I was just going to say, I have an alternative take that will explain why, in my opinion, we will not see the Xbox able to match the PS5 in terms of overall visual quality. All that stuff that I talked earlier about with the velocity architecture and stuff coming to PC, PC is going to catch up in the high end first, and then slowly into the mid-range. But Xbox has made a commitment to release every single game on Xbox on PC. That means they're developing for the lowest common denominator. that means they cannot properly make full use of their I/O. The I/O is very capable on the Xbox. It's not quite as good as the PS5, but even if it were, every game is developed for the low-end PC. That means they're limited in what they can accomplish in terms of level design, world building, visuals, because they develop for the low end first. That means it doesn't matter how good the Xbox Series X is. The games won't look as good as the best on the PS5.
I was going to say, this rumor about the PS5 Pro, that Red Gaming Tech dropped, and the next Xbox mid-gen refresh, it all kind of adds up, but the summary is the PS5 Pro is looking to be 2 to 2.5 times more powerful in terms of RAW, and even more powerful in terms of ray tracing capability. It'll scale better because it's got more dedicated ray traced hardware, right?
Well, it's using RDNA 3, right?
Whereas Xbox Series X is going to be even more powerful because Microsoft are very much the strategy, hey, you show your gun first, then I'm going to make a bigger one, right? Which is fair enough. But none of that will matter because they are still going to make those games for the Xbox Series S. They're still going to use the Xbox Series S as the lowest common denominator for all their games. That you're not going to get an Xbox game that isn't required, a first party, I mean, that isn't demanded to be available for the Xbox Series S also. So that's going to hold those games back. And PS5, it's not only going to be extremely powerful, doesn't need to be as powerful as the next Xbox mid-gen refresh, but it's going to be a more bespoke and utilize the leverage that the current PS5 has. See, the current PS5 is future-proof because of its I/O architecture. It's future-proof in not in power, but in what it can do to cater for game design, in its flexibility. And so and with that being the lowest denominator, it's going to be a cakewalk if the Xbox Series S remains Xbox's lowest denominator that they have to cater for, because I would argue the Series S with its RAM is not future-proof. It's not flexible. You know, that's my thoughts anyway. But I'm the noob here.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because if you look at this game that's I've forgotten the name, the game with the sword where Digital Foundry reviewed.
Ghost Runner?
Yeah, we're already seeing a massive compromise in terms of the options on Series S, and this is we're not yet even into the first year. We've not finished the first year. So for me, the Series S is fundamentally flawed in terms of being future-proof. But you know, there was I don't know. I feel like when it comes to Halo, I was looking at what the problem is with Halo right now. I don't know if you're touching on Halo, the graphics, or not. Oh, sorry, not yet, huh?
We probably lead into that, I think, soon.
Sorry.
Yeah, here right away, maybe.
Sorry, I'm dealing with a conflict in the chat, and my mate Umar called Starfield at Bugfield, and he got removed for spamming by a mod by one of my moderators only on Xbox. Bless him. I knew I took a chance with only on Xbox, but yeah, he's been put in time out.
Well, if I could just sum that up, and we can then that'll transition it, segue it into Halo.
Re-echo your question, OT, if you could, just for us all. Reiterate your question.
Okay. Sorry. No, I was gonna go into the disadvantages of cross-gen and the Halo and what I saw of Halo. So I think I'll just wait for us to get into that topic.
Awesome. Okay, go for it, HD Gamer.
I don't have too much more to add to that. I was just going to say, sort of an interesting perspective. We're sort of talking about that, you know, the weaker hardware has never sort of automatically equaled. The strongest hardware has not automatically equaled the best games. We've been told, I think, Optimus code. A few others said it's like the developer talent, the tools, the time as well. That's what's going to produce the better looking games. And with these multiple games, I feel it's just, as Maya said, it's going to be back and forward. Whichever one maybe gets the native port, whichever one's had a bit more time spent on the optimization, I think you'll see it go back and forth continually. An interesting perspective I've got on that is how will the console sales actually affect this. And if the PS5 is outselling the Series X, and the game sales continue, third-party game sales continue to favour PS5, I could easily see that becoming the lead platform for many devs, and spending the time to optimize, make a native version for that, get it running quite well, and then the others is just sort of a port, the PC, the Xbox version. So I wouldn't be surprised if you actually even see the PS5 edge out the Series X, just because devs may be spending more time on it because it's the lead platform. And console gaming's forecast to be like, I think, twice the PC sort of market by 2025. So I think there's going to be more focus on it. And that leads to I guess into Halo is where that cross-gen development, cross-gen multi-plat development sort of affects games and can limit them. And I think you can I think Halo looks great, but I think there are some sort of indicators there of some limitations maybe called that. So I'll let OG take over there and talk what he was going to say about Halo.
Yeah, so, when I posted pictures of Days Gone, the character models of the enemies in Days Gone, and the character model of Craig, the updated Craig, and some other guys in Halo Infinite. And I think one of the major problems these Halo guys are facing is the LOD models they are using are the same ones they're using for Xbox One, which is severely limited. And that is why you're finding that somehow Days Gone has better models, because the Sony developers did not have to reduce the quality of their models to the base Xbox One. So I don't know if I'm making sense. So basically, when they were making a PS4 Days Gone model of a monster or an enemy, they were using, let's say, a higher number of polygons. But then when I look at Halo Infinite, I mean, especially when the sniper shot, when you see the guy zooming into Craig in the distance, the guy looks like an Xbox One game at that point, just higher res. The geometry did not stick out, especially in game, that this was next gen. Now this is simply because the Xbox One model is what is being used and just rendered in high res on Halo Infinite. So Halo Infinite is having this weird vibe where sometimes you look at the textures, you're like, wow, that looks amazing. But then when you look at some of the character models and geometry, and you're like, even the trees, there just seems to be limitations done. Like, for instance, the trees, maybe they were limited to one type because that's easier on the RAM for the Xbox One. We know that Xbox Series X is more capable than what we are seeing of Halo, but it just isn't looking that. I mean, honestly, Days Gone beat it in terms of character models, and that was very surprising.
The density of the environment, I've noticed that too, with the vegetation. It just seems a little sparse, like not as densely vegetated or as much variety as you expect. And I think what you just said with that character model coming up in the scope, that could be just the case, that they haven't optimized that engine to sort of stream in the data. They're sort of using that base Xbox, to sort of determine what they can stream in and out. And they're like, well, the base Xbox can't swap in the higher LOD model in time, so we're not going to redesign the engine so it does that for the Series X. I'm not sure how much effort that is to sort of do that, but I can sort of see that, as you pointed out, that didn't look that detailed, that model, when they zoomed in on it.
No, I agree. See, Leviathan's the biggest Halo fan there is. There is no one on the earth who loves Halo more than him, I would argue. I would argue that to my grave. He's legit ridiculously into Halo. However,
I'm vaguely interested in Halo.
Yeah, so it's a shame.
I'll check it out if it's good.
It's a shame he's not here to hear it. But there are some things that I think have been improved. The lighting looks great, but yeah, that there is a clear issue, in my opinion, with geometry at a distance doesn't look good for starters. I mean, but I love the lighting. I will say that. Like, I'm just going to show a screen here. Here we go. So there's some nice lighting here. It gives me like No Man's Sky vibes in a way. But there is issues with geometry. But also my other issue is the overall design of the game, in terms of I'm only seeing one environment here in all the showcase gameplay, with towers being mentioned again and again and again, outposts to be destroyed, and I'm beginning to wonder, is this a Just Cause? Is this basically a first-person Just Cause game? And is it as shallow as one, or will it be more like? Will it have a strong narrative and linear aspects to the gameplay, with like big spectacles and events, or will it just kind of be a bit of an empty, shallow experience, especially with no co-op at launch?
I mean, like, it seems to me ever since 343 took over, that Halo became basically a cornucopia of controversy. Halo 4 was a very divisive game in the Halo community. Halo 5 was pretty much hated by everyone, and now Halo Infinite then also got its fair share of flag controversy ever since the first gameplay reveal, and then later they kind of redeemed themselves, but then it came out that there won't be no co-op campaign and no Forge at launch, and I really don't know what to think. Like, at that point, I just see what the outcome will be, because I'm neither negative nor am I positive about it all. I just see how eventually things will go down.
Yeah.
Just wait and see. Yeah.
There's something about the screenshot that I love right here. The metal. I love the metal of this. But I think it's a lucky snap, because there are a lot of areas that aren't quite this glamorous to look at, in my opinion. But I do want to touch on the fact that this pre-rendered model is being used a lot by people to kind of think that there's been a massive graphical upgrade. Guys, I'm just going to say lower your expectations, right? Because Dealer Gaming posted this screenshot here. I mean, he's one of the biggest paid influencers there is, but on Xbox, Team Xbox, and even he didn't realize this was a pre-rendered footage. But what Xbox marketing have done, in my opinion, is no favors for this game, because what was the elephant in the room from the initial reveal? It was Craig, right? The elephant in the room was Craig, and the elephant in the room was also that character model of the enemy who was talking at the camera with his plastic teeth and his low-resolution lips, right? And it was kind of mocked for years. And what did they do at the end of the trailer recently revealed? What did they do? Let me type it in. They addressed the elephant in the room how? Let me show you. Let me show you. Oh, remember that character model that you all mocked and looked at? Well, check this out, guys. Here we go. Oh, right. So, to me, that ending that I just showcased there, that little ending of that trailer, was Xbox addressing the elephant in the room. In my opinion, that was them going, guys, look at this. And everybody ran away with it, going, oh my god, look at the visuals, how much they've increased. Only for a dev to clarify that was pre-rendered. That was not in-game. Don't get your hopes too high.
Yeah.
So why do it? Why do it? Why address the elephant in the room of low in-game graphics by showing non-in-game pre-rendered graphics? It just doesn't make sense to me. It was a really big L on the marketing team standpoint. And Xbox themselves, again, shot themselves in the foot. How it started, how it's going. How it started, in-game character model, pre-rendered character model. My God, I don't understand what is going on. Why would you do that?
I found it extremely deceptive of 343 or whoever the marketing department is. I would rather they stuck with a completely render CGI trailer so that you do not mistake. But the minute they switched the ending model with a CGI trailer section, that's deceptive, because I can't even, technically in some ways I can't even blame dealer, because I'm like, I would not expect. He was misled. So I did make fun of dealer, but the thing is, he was misled, because normally you do not mix the two. Especially when it was such a glaring issue in the last trailer. And I really think the major problem these guys had, the 343 team, the engine is just not next gen. Xbox has not been known to create, let me say, incredible engines, like Decima or like whatever Uncharted do. If last year that engine was not yet at peak performance and we were saying, hey, Halo doesn't look good, you cannot turn that around in a year. Engines take at least maybe 3, 4, 5 years to make. There was nothing they could technically do. So I expect when people actually play this Halo, if they're expecting unbelievable next gen, they're going to be severely disappointed. I think they're just going to try and refine the game as best they can within the context of their engine.
Yeah. I did respond to Dealer because he damage controlled a little bit. He said, man, it's crazy how the crackheads still say Halo doesn't look better than it did a year ago. And then he proceeds to use Xbox's mess up, how it started, how it's going, as proof, right?
To be fair, I'm sure it does look better than it did a year ago, absolutely. But it just doesn't look like that, exactly. Right?
And then he put, raise your hand if you were completely oblivious to the point of this post. So the onus is on us, apparently. It's improved, bottom line. Stop trying to find ways out of admitting that it's okay to give Halo props. Absolutely. I've given Halo props a huge amount on Twitter, to the anger and frustration of a lot of people who know that I'm very pro PlayStation, and so I naturally attract fanboys as well as fans, and they're not happy with the praise that I give Halo, but I have given it its due, but I've also given it my fair share of criticism as well. And I give it criticism? Yes, I do. And I put to Dealer in response, I agree, it's improved. I've spoken pretty highly of Halo in general. However, I think you're oblivious to the implications of using pre-rendered snaps as an example of graphical improvement. Glad to see you raised your hand, though, next time using game comparisons. And here's a whole plethora of in-game shots showing Halo Infinite superior in texture resolution and quality and lighting to Halo 5. However, it's kind of like not a massive improvement, but it's an improvement, and give Halo props for that, I think Dealer should have just took the L on that one, personally, but it is what it is. However, I have many times given Halo props, like just the other day I said here, where is it? Here we go. Honestly, this guy has a great point. Halo is looking nowhere near as bad as the YouTube compression makes it out to be. In fact, it's looking pretty damn good. Halo has me excited. Big ups to 343. And I also put, there are games that have downgraded, like Watch Dogs, but Halo has upgraded from Halo 5, so there's that. It's not a massive upgrade, but it is an upgrade. And the multiplayer has me excited. So, and I get Xbox fanboys accusing me of doing nothing but shitting on Halo and shitting on Xbox, but I just think they only see what they want to see. But yeah, I think Halo fans' main concern, I know it's certainly Leviathan's, is how it plays, not in how it looks. And it seems like 343 have taken the time to really listen to the hardcore community. They want ADS to be almost pointless, but still an option for those who want ADS. Pointless in the fact that it doesn't slow you down and require a long amount of time to scope in. So ADS is very quick and punchy, and walking is still fast, allowing maneuverability and skill-based play. And that was the main concerns, and that's all been addressed. There's good customization in it, so I'm going to play it, but I'm more interested in the multiplayer because the campaign to me just isn't looking too hot at all. I don't know what to say. The trailer just didn't sell me.
I don't feel we've been sold completely on the campaign, and I'd say, look, not to get it confused. Like I do think Halo looks like a good game. Like it's going to be a fun game. I'm going to pick it up on PC. Some screenshots look great. Some of them look really, really good. That improve the graphics. Some look good, and some look okay. So, I mean, from the perspective of what the Halo fans want, I think they're hitting the nail on the head. It looks really fun. Great gameplay mechanics. I think the addition of that grapple hook, I mean, a lot of options with that, and the open world nature. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of emergent gameplay. So you tackle situations different ways, try different things with that. I think that's a really good addition. But campaign-wise, 100% convinced. I'll have to see how they're going to tell like that story. Open world games in general, just from my perspective, do sort of struggle to tell great. Sometimes I tend to get sidetracked with side missions, collecting berries and the world's ending. So you lose that sense of urgency sort of sometimes with the side content. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it. It's still sort of, I'm going to play it. I think it's going to be a good game. Will it be probably even be a great game, but is it going to be the best graphical game we see this year, next year? I don't think so. I think it's just going to be one of the great games, not the best game. So,
guys, sorry, I've got to go. Yeah, sorry guys, I've got to go.
Wrap
but
this up anyway, OT. But if you've got a dash, my bro, no problem.
But I just want to leave one point. I'd urge guys, check Halo's first tech demo trailer. It was unbelievable. The one where they're showing the different environments and the rhinos running, it was unbelievable. Check their second trailer that they had where you see the guy, guys have forgotten there was a trailer where you first see the guy in the ship. He had short hair in that video. And Master Chief appears. The first video we saw of Master Chief floating, that video also had better visuals than the current version of Halo Infinite. So if you saw the tech demo and the second demo that they showed, it showed how good that engine can be. But unfortunately, I am sure once they run it on console, the numbers were terrible. Maybe even 20 frames per second, 30. There was something wrong because the visuals have gone down. Now, they went down after that terribly, and now they've come back up, but they have not yet come back up.
Certainly not up to this level.
Especially,
I agree.
Yeah, they didn't get back up to how they initially showed it. And that brings me back to the engines Microsoft makes. That's not where their strength is. Sony make much better engines that scale well with their hardware.
And
okay, guys.
All right, brother. I'll let you go, but thank you so much, OT. You've been awesome tonight, and it's an absolute honor. And much love to you and your newborn and your family.
Yeah.
And
thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Bye, OT.
Take care, guys.
Stay awesome, brother.
It's been an honor, buddy. Thank you.
All right.
So that was King OT leaving. King OT is out. But guys, no, I agree with him. Looking at this trailer right now, it's almost like a completely different. It is a completely different game that they're showcasing here, in my opinion. And again, this brings us back to scalability. And I think if they weren't trying to run this on an Xbox One, maybe we would have had a game like this. This was their vision, and it's not been realized. Which is a shame.
To their credit, something that my understanding of Halo Infinite, it's supposed to be a live service game, so they're constantly adding to it over time, and I would expect there'll come a point where they leave the previous generation behind and continue delivering updates only on the series.
I hope so, brother. It makes sense.
If that happens, I can see the quality coming up a lot more.
And they'll say you can play Halo Infinite on Xbox One, but via the cloud only. And that's a possibility.
Yeah, maybe. Or like you're limited to multiplayer or the older campaign content. You don't continue to get the new access to the new stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, to Halo. I think we've kind of covered it. It's the campaign leaves me wanting to know more. I want to know primarily if there's depth to the campaign, and it's not just a series of fetch quests and go here, destroy this outpost. Far Cry. I just don't want it to be like Far Cry, I'd much rather it being more like Destiny, with where each mission, you've got the fetch quests and stuff, but you've got more kind of focused, epic missions that have spectacle and scope and grandeur to them. But it is what it is. But yeah, I'm excited for the multiplayer. I think hats off to 343 for bringing it back the way they have with the multiplayer, although I do still think it should be delayed personally. But it is what it is. Guys, do you guys have anything to add before we wrap this up? Okay then.
Done for me.
It's been, when I say it's been the best podcast we've had yet, I mean it. I mean, we've had David Jaffe on. Shout out to him, absolute legend, the creator of God of War himself.
Well, that's awesome.
And even that. We've outdone ourselves tonight, because I've learned so much. I've learned so much from you guys, and honestly, I'm sure I can speak for OT as well, even though he's left, because he messaged me before, and for the chat. It's been awesome and a really educational experience, but also an experience that kind of has helped us to appreciate even more just how future-proof and ambitious this new console generation is going to be.
For sure.
And exciting. We are not ready for what's coming. So Mayor Tech Rants, thank you, brother. I'm so grateful that you came. I know you're highly requested on podcasts, but if ever you want to come on the show again, you are always welcome. Please know there's a seat for you here if you ever want to show up again. It's been great having you. Where can we find you, my guy?
Well, you can find me, probably the best way is just Twitter at Meyer Tech Rants. I also have a Discord, but I spend a fair bit of time on Twitter, so just reach out to me there if you want to talk.
Awesome stuff.
And I will probably take you up on the podcast one of these days. I enjoyed. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, honestly, you and HD Gamer make a dream team. Honestly, as well as Leviathan, as well, and OT, all of you guys, and Wilhelm. I mean, I know you felt a bit out of your depth tonight, same as me, because me and you, we're not experts in this field, but it's just been. I hope you haven't felt too kind of pushed to the side, my bro, and just enjoyed learning all this stuff along with me as well, learning. But
I mean, you can't always win.
Even Charlie Sheen has lost some battles, right?
Right, yeah.
But yeah, but thank you, Maya. We
No
will.
problem.
Yeah, I recommend strongly all of you guys in the chat follow Maya, Maya Tech Rants. He is definitely worth a follow. And HD Gamer, absolute same sentiments to you, my guy. Absolutely awesome show tonight. Thanks to you as well, largely. And there is always a seat with your name on it if ever you want to jump on the show again. I'm sure we would love to have you join us again, because you really captivated a lot of our attention with the way that you articulate things and break things down. Plus you have an awesome accent, so that helps. But thank you. Where can we find you, HDG?
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's been great, and if I've got something I feel I can add to the conversation or give a different perspective, I'd definitely take you up on that offer. With Maya, just to jump off the back of this, I think he's also mentioned he has that awesome blog spot. Which
Yeah, I
I've
want to know what that
followed
is. Can you say it and I'll type it in the chat? What is that blog?
Oh yeah, it's just meyertechrants.blogspot.com.
.blogspot.
.blogspot, yeah.
Okay, Maya. Oh, awesome. Carry on, HD.
I'm going to say, and me, I'm just generally on Twitter, which is just at HD_gamer_84. You can see me sort of working on Twitter every now and again. But yeah, it's been a great experience, and just more so than just get to talk to you guys. Like, it's just been really good. Really appreciate you the invite.
Honestly, HD, it's the honor is ours. It's been fire, and I'm bloody honored that you feel that way about being on this show. And I hope it hasn't come across like just fanboyish nonsense. Whatever I've said. Sorry about the noise in the background. What I want this podcast to be is exactly what was delivered tonight. Kind of a bit of an equilibrium where we kind of go into the deeper things and find out the reality of a situation, so that we can appreciate the full picture more. And you guys have really helped with that tonight in the things that you've said. So with this podcast being primarily focused on that and not all about Game Pass, I just want to say thank you, and you're always welcome. Go on, mate.
I was going to say, and we got through the whole podcast without mentioning Game Pass until just then.
Holy shit, that's so true. Oh no. But it's true though, right? We haven't spoken about it all, and that makes such a refreshing change, if you ask me. So yeah, we had to get it in somewhere, right? Fuck, I'm gutted that I said it now. Gutted. And my brother Wilhelm, where can we find you, my guy? Oh, sorry, yeah, you don't have Twitter, do you, right now?
At the parking lot, looking for work.
Well, let me tell you.
I don't have the luxury of being invited by Salty every Thursday or something. You know what? I get that thing trending now. #Saltiest Gaming. Hire Will.
I love it.
Okay, get it all trending, people. I want it to become a thing. Okay.
I agree.
Also,
he should have you on. I'll be having words with him.
Also, I personally invite Chris O'Neill, Ding Dong, and Julian from Only Plays, and Wan Games to come on the podcast. I absolutely adore these guys, and I know Charlie Sheen was in pretty, unrealistic demand, and I don't know how likely these possibilities are, but I would be absolutely higher than a manic depressed on cocaine if these guys would show up.
I love it.
Also, people, please, panel or the people watching, tell Chris O'Neill, Julian, and Ding Dong from Only Plays and Wan Games that they're free to come on the Worldwide Company of Gamers podcast.
Amen, my dude. 100%. I need to write these names down because I don't have a clue who these guys are.
You need to check them out. Yeah. Only Places, they're the most hilarious.
Don't judge me.
Thing. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying they're like the most hilarious dudes I've ever seen. Like, their videos made me laugh like an absolute maniac since 2017.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So saltiest gaming hire will hashtag. Yeah, 100%. No, it's been fire. And shout out to OT. His description is below in the description of the video if you want to follow him. Please hit that subscribe button and that bell icon. And thank you so much for watching this awesome 10 out of 10 fire episode of the Worldwide Company of Gamers podcast.